That is the strangest thing.
We saved one donut for you, Nick.
I moved.
You moved?
Yeah. So I
You said
said
turn around to
the
be digital thing?
screen. No, I want to see the screen.
She almost we stopped.
Okay, good. Yeah.
But what I will need is your actual mileage.
All right.
Okay.
Good morning. It is 8:30 a.m., May 26th, 2017. I am Dr. David Bagley, the hearing officer in docket 17-4802 in regards to Brook Mine LLC. Present today from the council are Megan Lawley, Nick Agopian, Deb Dahmer, Megan Dagenfelder, and Tim Flitner are absent. Councilman Fair Service has recused himself. Parties present today, I will allow them to introduce themselves. We'll just go in the same order we've been going. So we'll start with Brook Mine.
Good morning, Dr. Bagley. Thank you. Isaac Sutphin, Jeffrey Pope, and Tom Sansonetti from Holland and Hart.
Thank you. DEQ.
Andrew Pullman and James LaRocca from the General's office.
Thank you. Powder River Basin Resource Council.
Good morning, Shannon Anderson on behalf of Powder River Basin Resource Council.
Thank you. The Fishers.
Jay Gilbert, still with Yankee and Cook.
Thank you. And Bighorn Coal.
Good morning, Lynn Boomgarden and Clay Gregerson.
Thank you. Also present for the council are Jim Ruby, Executive Officer, and Joe Gerardin, Council Business Coordinator. And we have Mackenzie, what's your last name? Sorry? Mackenzie Williamson joining us from the Attorney General's office. This hearing is being held at Sheridan College, room TRCC 008 in the Thornrider Campus Center, 3059 Coffeen Avenue, Sheridan, Wyoming. There is a court reporter present. So we had just yesterday evening completed direct of a witness, and so Ms. Anderson, if you could please, oh, you're done with direct, so I do want to remind the witness, sure to get your name here correctly.
Booyah.
John Booyak, just to remind you, you're still under oath, and now we will begin cross-examination. We'll start with you, Mr. Gilberts.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Booyah.
Good morning.
We met, I think, your deposition, which was taken by Holland and Hart, right?
Yes,
A few questions for you this morning. Yesterday, you said that you were an engineer by training, is that right?
yes.
What did you do in your career as an engineer?
Well, the first 4 or 5 years, I worked for the state engineer's office in Cheyenne on water rights. I was assistant superintendent in Division 1 and then interstate streams engineer for the state of Wyoming. Then I went to work for Western Water Consultants. I worked for them for, it's either 7 or 8 years, I can't remember exactly. And then after that, I went to work for Aquaterra Consultants.
You went to work for?
Aquaterra Consultants. I worked for them for 7 or 8 years also, and then ever since 1998, I've been out on my own.
It sounds then, from that description, like the focus of your engineering work has been in water-related matters.
Mostly, but did a lot of mining engineering also.
Okay. Tell me about that. What mining engineering did you do?
Well, I was primarily working on reclamation plans, but did some mine planning also over the years. Did quite a bit of work on high wall stability and things like that.
Okay. There was a statement made in the openings that some of the objectors or folks that were concerned about the project hadn't spent any time with the mine plan to try to understand it. Did you spend time with the mine plan?
And I'd have to say in the hundreds of hours by now.
And
Well, I should say with the permit document, not just the mine plan.
Okay, the entire permit document, this thing that's sitting up on the wall behind you?
Yes,
And you said hundreds of dollars.
I think so.
Were your concerns informed by what you did or did not see in this mine plan?
Yes, they are.
Now, with this understanding that you have a background in dealing with water issues, did I hear you testify yesterday that you had attempted to drill a well below the Kearney seam and had drilled to a depth of 1,000 feet?
Yes, I did in 2 different places.
Two wells to 1,000 feet.
Yeah,
Okay. And in neither one you could find any usable water for your house below the Kearney seam?
yes, that's correct.
As the crow flies, Mr. Booyah, and let's use a crow so we don't get wet. How far is it to the Fisher house?
About 3/8 of a mile.
3/8 of a mile, a little less than half mile.
Yeah,
Okay. And so your real world experience in that area and drilling these 2 wells is that there isn't a good aquifer at 400 or 500 feet that would serve as a replacement well for the Fishers, as Jeff Barron testified to yesterday.
you know, geology can change from place to place, but I know at least that close to the Fishers, there isn't.
3/8 of a mile away, you couldn't find.
I couldn't find them. Well, actually, the one that we did try that was up on the hill above my sister's house was probably 400 yards from their house, maybe only 200 yards from their property.
Okay. And so that well up on the hill is only, what did you say, 400 yards from the Fisher's property or Fisher's house?
Yeah.
And I also wanted to explore a little bit about this. You mentioned that in some extremely dry years, you had problems with the water in your water well?
Yeah, the water level dropped so much that we were pumping sediment up from the bottom of the well, and we were having to change filters about every other day to keep our water supply.
Okay. Does that fact inform your concern about the notion that there will be drawdown in these wells?
Yes, according to the mine plan, there will be 1.2 feet of drawdown in our house well. And in a dry year, that would run us out of water.
And so do you understand, is your understanding that the documents in the mine plan suggest that there will be a 1.2 foot drawdown in your domestic well?
Yes.
And then I think you testified yesterday. When was it that you learned there was an assertion that your well and house fell just feet outside of the 1/2 mile boundary?
That was in my deposition or right after my deposition.
Right after your deposition, which was just a couple of weeks ago.
Yes,
Okay. Is that a matter of concern to you?
of course. Yeah.
Why?
Well, we're not, according to the law, we're not eligible for a pre-blast survey. And I can't remember all the other things, but there are other things that go along with the 1/2 mile limit also.
Okay. If it were true that because you're just feet outside of that 1/2 mile boundary, you would also not be entitled to the well replacement water, is that something you'd like this council to consider adding as a condition?
I'm not sure if it is or isn't, but I would like them to add that as a condition if they would.
Thank you. Now, before I do that, in your review of the mine plan, was there anything that caused you to be concerned about any particular area of mining?
Well, of course, I was interested in the areas that were closest to our house, but I was also a little concerned about the TR1 area.
What was your concern about the TR1?
Well, to kind of add more detail to it, we did take a tour out there on Wednesday. And
So, Mr. Bagley, I'm sorry, I'm going to need to interject with an objection here. This is information that is not included in Mr. Booyak's own personal objection letter, nor is any of this referenced in the Powder River Basin Resource Council's objection letter. And I certainly think it's highly inappropriate for him to testify about things that he's done and site visits that he's conducted as part of this case. He's not an expert witness. He's never been submitted to be an expert witness, and I think it's highly inappropriate.
Dr. Garcia, I may respond. And I'll let Mr. Gilbert as well as the business question. So the whole purpose of us being here today is to receive public comment. That's the very purpose of this here. The very purpose of this being here is to allow the parties that have objected to the permit application to present information to you as the council to consider when you're reviewing the permit application. It's not limited to what we wrote in our objection letter back in January. It's not limited to even what we put in the petition for review. It's limited to what we provide to you today. This is the point of this hearing. It's an evidentiary hearing to present information to you for you to consider in your decision-making process. Brook will have some opportunity to ask some clarifying questions about this if they so choose. But Mr. Bouillon is a neighbor to this mine. He's well informed about the property, his interests. I think we've established he has some background and experience. We're not offering him as an expert witness, but he does have some relevant factual information that we think would benefit the council. And that's all we're trying to do here today.
Thank you, Dr. Bagley. I would say that I did not ask him for an expert opinion. I asked him if he had any concerns, and he said that he did. And he also then said those concerns were heightened by a recent visit. I will add lastly that this continues a phenomenally disturbing pattern of an effort to keep these landowners from being hurt. They have to be here today with you guys because nobody would give them an opportunity to have a simple meeting. And then we have efforts to kick out their objections and say, nope, can't even have this hearing. And then we get here, and now it's, nope, we can't hear from these folks. It's just a terribly disturbing pattern.
Dr. Bagley, if I might, there are two things that need to be clarified. First, Mr. Gilberts began Mr. Bouillon's questioning by establishing his background and his experience as an engineer in water-related issues, clearly an attempt to bootstrap him in as an expert witness that was not designated to testify as such. And secondly, the only thing we're asking is the same thing that all the objectors are asking, to look at this carefully and to apply the law and the rules the way they're supposed to be applied. The fact that we have ended up in a contested case hearing has nothing to do with decisions made by Brook. The director of the DEQ chose to exercise his discretion not to hold informal conferences, but the fact that we are in a contested case hearing means that certain formalities of the law need to be applied. Mr. Gilbert, Ms. Anderson, and all of the attorneys involved in this case understand that. And we are not trying to silence anyone. We're trying to keep this within the rules and the law.
So on this particular objection, the question was related to TR1, and from what I could tell on the maps, Mr. Bouillon's property is not up against that part of the mine, planned mine. It's further up gradient. I don't know if the rest of the council agrees with me. We've heard an awful lot about TR1, and I mean, important information, but what I'd like to do is let's keep the focus of Mr. Bouillon's questions on the areas that are related to his experience as a property owner. I appreciate his background as an engineer, being an engineer myself, but he has not been hired to be the expert on this. So we want to hear what the landowners' views are, but really how it is related to their experience. And we don't need additional expert opinion on other aspects of the mine plan from landowners. That's not what we've heard lots of experts, and I think we'll even hear more. So let's keep the focus related to Mr. Bouillon's experiences in his property, which I think there are plenty.
Dr. Bagley, do we need, as a council, to be advised by the Attorney General's office about the appropriateness of conducting a public comment session in the middle of a contested case hearing? It's my understanding we're here today to hear about technical deficiencies associated with the mine permit that's been applied. And for whatever reason we're here today, in the course of events that have occurred this year, the informal conference was not held. We did not adhere to the 20-day schedule, and a variety of things have gone in a variety of directions. And so I would hope that the testimony today is focused on technical deficiencies associated with the permit. And unfortunately, while we didn't have a public hearing as associated with either the informal conference or requested within that 30-day period, I think we need to be mindful of that and mindful of why we are here today.
Thank you, Mr. Gopian. Yeah, I've already spoken with our Attorney General's representatives, and it's our view, or his recommendation was that we allow evidence that we feel could have a bearing, as long as it's not irrelevant, immaterial, or unduly repetitious. And in this case, Tier 1, I feel we definitely discussed a lot. But I would like to hear the landowners called as witnesses by one of the contestants. So we'll continue that.
I wanted to
Thank
share
you.
my feelings.
We're ready.
We are ready.
Brook, I wanted to talk to you about some of your testimony regarding subsidence from yesterday. You said something yesterday about how the Tongue River Valley transferred shock vibrations well, or something like that. Do you remember that?
Yes.
What were you meaning by that? I didn't fully understand.
Just that the alluvium is full of water for the most part, and so it's pretty unconsolidated. If you have a vibration on one side of the valley, it tends to transfer across the valley much more easily than necessarily a vibration would through dry ground or overburden.
Okay. And I wanted to follow up on your personal experience with subsidence. If I understood you correctly yesterday, you were showing the council a photo of some subsidence and explaining how it was actually in the process of subsiding within the last several weeks.
Yes.
And then I understand that you personally have had experience with a subsidence in your tractor. We heard about that during your deposition. Could you explain that?
Yeah, I was harrowing a field. I can't remember, it was either 3 or 4 years ago, and the front wheel of my tractor fell in a subsidence pit. And luckily it didn't subside more than 4 or 5 feet in diameter. And the other 3 wheels I was able to keep on the ground and pull the tractor back down. It was a 4-wheel drive tractor.
Now, to understand that, make sure we're clear about that, did it actually subside as you were driving over it, or did you just drive into one you didn't see?
No, it subsided as I drove over.
Okay, good. Now, Mr. Emmy told this council earlier that this week that even though he had not been out in that area of subsidence for years, that in effect that there was no reason to be concerned about further subsidence of these old mines because they had subsided already. Does that square with your real world experience of subsidence out in your area?
No, they're continuing to subside every year almost. We have another area that subsides.
Thank you, Mr.
We have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Mr. Sutton.
Dr. Bradley, I'm sorry, did you want to ask Ms. Gilbertin, or I don't know what order we're going in, but.
We have no questions, but I would appreciate the opportunity if we do have questions with each of these witnesses.
You're on my list, yes.
Okay.
I'm just going on the order that I had here.
Okay, thank you.
So no, I'm not going to miss anybody.
Okay.
A chance to speak.
The order is kept changing, so I just want to clarify the order.
Yeah, it's been moving a little, yeah.
Okay.
It's correct.
Thank you.
It's not random.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Dr. Bagley, thank you. Mr. Booyak, how are you this morning?
Okay.
I know at your deposition you mentioned that you weren't going to testify at this trial, right, at this hearing?
Yes,
And I appreciate that you've apparently changed your mind, due at least in part to me wanting to take your deposition, right?
yes.
During your deposition, did I do anything that offended or intimidated you in any way?
I don't think so.
You were here, though, during the opening statements, right?
Yes,
And you heard Ms. Anderson talk about how we tried to use intimidation factors. Do you remember that?
yes,
You wouldn't agree, though, that I did anything to intimidate you, would you?
no,
I understand you've had a lot of questions and concerns about how the Brook Mine Plan might affect your property. You never actually asked anyone at Brook Mine to respond to any of your concerns, did you?
no, I didn't.
And you never asked Mr. Barron, the engineer from Western Water Consultants, primarily responsible for this permit file, did you?
No, I didn't.
One of your primary concerns is protecting your water well, is that fair to say?
Yes,
And you were concerned about the lack of protection if those wells are not considered adjudicated, right?
yes,
But you heard Dr. Kuchenauer testify that he acknowledged your concern, fair?
yes,
And he agreed that the term adjudicated needs to be removed so that all permitted wells that are impaired fall under the protections, fair?
yeah,
Must feel pretty good to have a PhD hydrogeologist agree with your objection, right?
it doesn't hurt.
Would you agree that as long as that change is included in the state decision document, your concern about the water well would be resolved?
My concern about the Brook Mine's responsibility to replace it would be resolved, but not my concern about whether it would be able to be replaced.
Right, but you do agree that the permit commitments would require Brook to either replace it or to provide similar quality and quantity of water if it's found that they impaired your well, right?
Yes,
They may not be able to drill a new well for you, but they have an obligation to provide you with water, right?
that's the way I understand it, although I would have the same concern that was mentioned before, that if the only other option was hauling in water, how would I ensure that that happened in perpetuity?
Well, right, but as you sit here today, you have no reason to believe that Brook Mine couldn't accomplish hauling in water as long as was necessary, right?
Right,
You testified when you were asked by Ms. Anderson that these water wells were not a minor concern, right?
right,
And she talked about how earlier testimony had referred to that as a minor revision. Do you remember her saying that?
I think so.
You would agree with me, based on your experience with mine permits, that deletion of a single word would be considered a minor modification under the DEQ process, right?
Objection, calls for a legal conclusion, and we just established from Holland and Hart that Mr. Booyok is not an expert.
I'm asking this witness if removal of a single word would constitute anything more than a minor modification to the permit, because they've tried to mischaracterize that testimony as some sort of dig at these landowners. That's all I'm asking.
It is an interpretive question. I mean, and Mr. Buick has indicated that if his well goes dry, that's a major issue to him. You can go ahead and ask that question, but let's keep it focused.
I would say it depends on the word. Some words could make a major change.
What about the removal of the word adjudicated to satisfy your concerns?
I think that would be a minor revision.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry, that would be.
A minor revision.
Let's talk a little bit about the pre-blast survey. I'm going to ask Carrie to bring up an aerial image, except we don't have the dongle. Amazing. Mr. Booyok, while we're pulling this up, would you mind grabbing the pointer, please?
Okay.
Mr. Booyok, I acknowledge it's a little tough to see up there. But do you recognize that the bottom portion of this is an aerial view of your home?
Yes,
Can you use the pointer and point out to the council where your residence is?
right here.
Okay? And thank you for dimming the lights.
Sorry, Dr.
What
Brook,
is-
just for the record, is this an exhibit that's being offered, or was it provided to the parties, or?
Mr. Chairman, this is simply a demonstrative exhibit to show the council where Mr. Booyok's residence is in location to the Brook Mine permit and the half-mile buffer. We're not submitting it as evidence, just as a demonstrative.
I'll allow this. I've been wondering myself how close we are getting this testimony.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Booyok, can you please, well, what is the structure that's near the top of the aerial view here?
This one here,
Yes, sir.
it's a machinery shed.
Okay.
Machinery shed?
Do you recognize this image as an aerial view that Mr. Barron showed you shortly after your deposition?
He just showed me on his phone. It's hard to tell exactly, but it looks like it's the same thing.
Okay. And he showed you that the half-mile buffer line for the permit boundary is the orange line right between your machinery shed and your home, right?
Yes,
Okay. And I think you testified that the well, your domestic well is about 20 feet outside of the half-mile buffer, right?
yes,
Can you point on this aerial roughly where your water well is located?
about right here.
Thank you. And I think you also said that your house is approximately 40 feet outside. Is that fair to say?
Yes,
Okay. And I think the words you used yesterday were that leaves you out of the legal remedies with respect to the Brook Mine. Do you remember that?
yes,
Okay. But isn't it true that that Brook Mine has offered to include you in that half-mile buffer zone because you're so close?
they've offered, but as I was told by the attorneys, that doesn't matter. The half-mile buffer is a half-mile buffer, and
Isn't it
that's the
true?
law.
Isn't it true that Brook Mine offered to make a condition of this permit, including you within the half-mile buffer, and all you had to do was ask, right?
I didn't understand it as a condition of the permit. I did understand that they offered to do that.
Let's talk briefly about blasting. You don't consider yourself an expert on blasting, do you?
No,
So you would agree with me that you would defer to someone like Mr. Emmy, who is an expert with 27 plus years of experience in blasting?
yes,
Okay. Let's pull up exhibit PRBRC number 80. You remember this is the picture of the subsidence that you talked about yesterday, one of them?
yes,
And I think you told us that when you went out this week with PRBRC's expert witnesses that there was another crack that had formed, is that right?
yes.
Can you show us on this image, on this picture, where that new crack has formed?
It's hard to tell exactly, but basically it runs about 4 feet outside the outside perimeter of this all the way around.
Okay, and you said it's about 4 feet. So in other words, this sinkhole is now approximately, well, I'm terrible. I guess it'd be 8 feet bigger in diameter.
Well, it's not yet, but it will be soon.
I see. Brook hasn't been doing any blasting out in the vicinity of this sinkhole in the last 2 weeks, have they?
No,
And you would agree they haven't done any high wall mining anywhere near here in the last few weeks, wouldn't you?
yes,
And you do know, right, Mr. Booyok, that these old underground mines were designed as planned subsidence mines, right?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, before we leave the issue of the, well, we've already left it, I guess, so it's, I can't say before we leave it. But before we move on, I want to go back and ask you a question about that half-mile buffer again, okay?
Okay.
I think I heard you say that you didn't know until after your deposition that your house was outside of that half-mile buffer, right?
Yeah, the other maps that I'd seen appeared to me like my house was within the half-mile boundary.
But you would agree, you knew that you weren't included on the list of residences within the half-mile buffer that's a part of the permit file, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, I mean,
None of my buildings were though either. All of these are definitely within, but they weren't on the list either.
yeah, I appreciate that. Let's talk just briefly about those vibrations and the Tongue River alluvium that you talked about. I think in your objection letter, you mentioned that when the trains go by on the BNSF main line, dishes in your house rattle, right?
Yes.
And you were here when Mr. Emmy talked about how rattling dishes and maybe rattling photographs or pictures on the wall are typical manifestations that you might experience during blasting. Were you here for that?
Yes, I would.
Okay. And wouldn't you agree with me that that sounds an awful lot like what you're experiencing now?
I don't have enough experience to tell whether a blast would give more vibrations than the train would.
You do agree with me, though, that the railroad main line is only about a quarter mile from your house, right?
Yes.
And you would also agree that the blasting is only going to be at least a half mile away from your house, right?
That's correct.
Okay. In your objection letter, you stated that blasting can only exacerbate the subsidence. Do you remember that?
Yes.
But you also admitted in your deposition that you can't prove that statement, correct?
Right.
At the end of your testimony yesterday, you made some suggestions for maybe the Brook mine could start their operations at the TR2 pit. You remember saying that?
Yes.
You also mentioned maybe they could start at with the surface mining operation rather than doing the highwall mining first, right?
Right.
Would you agree with me that if they started in either the TR2 area or the surface mine area, you would withdraw your objections?
For the TR2 area, I think I would. I'm not sure about the open pit mine area because it's pretty close to our place also, and there would be blasting involved there also.
Thank you, Mr. Buyak. I appreciate your candor today. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Sefton. Mr. Coleman or Mr. LaRock?
Hi, good morning, John.
Good morning.
I just want to say we really appreciate you coming in and taking time out of your day to tell us about your concerns. And I just want to explain, I think Isaac's already touched on this, but when we say a change is minor, we just mean we're changing a couple words out of that.
Yeah.
I'm going to admit that I am testifying. So I'll concede that that's true, but if Ms. Anderson is concerned that maybe the state hasn't talked enough with landowners, she's objecting to my question. I'm just going to point that out. But I will withdraw the question.
Thank you.
I would just for the record, this is not the only forum the department can speak.
Yeah, we're here just at this forum. That's all we're worried about right now, so.
All right. Mr. Buyak, do you have any other questions or concerns or anything else you want to say about this permit application that you haven't felt you've had the chance to say yet?
I don't think so.
Thank you very much. We have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. LaRock. Ms. Baumgartner?
No questions.
Thank you. Council members, any questions? Thank you.
No questions.
Megan?
Sorry. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
I actually have a question. But one, thank you, Mr. Boyak, for coming
Thank you.
and testifying. I did, as the maps were flying back and forth yesterday, I got a little bit lost. Is your property or your home south of I-90?
Yes, it is.
And are you south of the Tongue River?
Yes.
So you're south of both of those. But it seems like you might be quite close to both of those. Could you give me an idea about how close you are to I-90 and the Tongue River?
Well, the property or our house?
Both, please.
Okay. Well, our property's probably 200 yards. At the nearest point, it's maybe 200 yards from I-90. Our house is probably a little over a quarter of a mile from I-90. As far as the river goes, we have a hayfield that's in an oxbow of the river, and so the river is our property boundary on the northern side. As far as the house goes, our house is located, I guess, around 100 feet from the river.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Anderson.
Thank you, Dr. Beckley. John, I just have a couple of questions for you to follow up on some questions that were asked to me a few minutes ago. You talked a little bit about replacement of water wells and that concern that you have. But I want to clarify, you also have a concern about impairment of your water.
Yes.
Do you believe that the home mine operator and the Department of Environmental Quality also have affirmative duties to prevent harm?
Yes, I do.
You also were asked a question about, the map, and you're a little bit outside the half mile, and maybe you could be in the half mile if the company lets you, basically, a little exception there. Do you remember anything else about that conversation with the company and the offer they were asking of you?
They said that they would get me on the list to be within the half mile of the boundary. And they also asked if I would drop all my other objections if they agreed to do that.
So it was your understanding that in order to make that happen, you have to withdraw your objections?
Oh, no, I think Mr. Barron said that they would do it anyway, but they did want to know if I would drop my other objections.
And just to be clear with the council, would you think it's important that that condition is part of the permit and enforceable by the permit?
I think it would be helpful.
I think that's all I have for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Boyak.
Thank you.
Ms. Anderson, please call your next witness.
I call Brook Collins. Can I have the projector?
I'll get it. It's kind of around here.
Ma'am, I'll have you raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Good morning. Could you please say and spell your name for the record, please?
Yes, ma'am. My name is Brooke Ann Collins. It's Brooke. Ann is ANN and Collins is COLLINS.
Okay, so not to be confused with Brook Hardy.
Correct.
Okay, excellent. So we'll add that E to your name.
Please.
For the record. All right, could you also state your address and explain where you live, please?
Yes, my address is 38 Monarch Road. Get my mail through Ranchester.
Hold on.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, if you could speak a little
I
slower.
think you're very loud. Just.
Okay, I live at 38 Monarch Road and the mailing address is Ranchester, but it's in the old mining town of Monarch.
Okay, great. I have on the screen our exhibit 91. Brook, is this the house that you live in?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
I'm going to pull up another photo for us. This is our exhibit 92. Is this also a depiction of the house that you live in?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Okay. And these were late filed exhibits, exhibit 91 and 92. Ms. Collins decided she was going to testify after last Wednesday. So I have filed them with the council's website and I have copies available for the court reporter. The parties have all received them and it's my understanding there are no objections. All right. Brook, I'm going to pull back this map that John was testifying to a little bit about the location of his property. Could you show us on this map approximately where you live? You can
Don't know if I
see
can.
that map.
Oh, wait, there I am.
Is that easier?
I think I went right.
And for the record, this is DQ Exhibit 12, page 145. And Ms. Collins just indicated approximately where she lives. Can you tell us, I'll pull back up this picture of your house, Exhibit 91. Can you tell us anything about this particular structure in which you live?
Oh, I can. This is, it was built in 1923 as a result of some kind of strange behavior that had happened in the late 1800s and early 1900s. There was a Catholic church that was in the town of Carneyville, and it was burnt down. The old people that talked about it wouldn't tell you exactly who burnt it down, but basically it was a way to get to the immigrants. If you burnt down the Catholic church, you hurt the immigrants. So they rebuilt another Catholic church, and it was then in Cleanburn because Carneyville changed their name to Cleanburn to reflect the clean burning coal. So they built another one in Cleanburn, and it was also burnt down. And so they built another Catholic church, this time in Monarch, and this time out of 14-inch thick cut stone. And it hasn't been burnt down yet.
Thank you. Would you say you have a multi-generational connection to the area?
I do. I'm actually the fifth generation of my family to live in Monarch. I had two great-grandmothers that lived in Monarch. One came from Bohemia and the other one came from Iowa. So yes, I've got family members who are buried in the Monarch Church across the way under the Brook Mine property. And yes, I've got strong family ties to it.
Excellent. And just for the record, how long have you lived where you've lived?
I started working and investing in this property in 1990s. I moved in 2001. I also had neighbors, Will and Olga Long. When Olga passed away, Mr. Long went and lived with his family, and since that time I have been the caretaker of the Long property, which is right next door to me as well.
Brook, did you file an objection to the permit application back in January?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
I'm going to pull up our Exhibit 10.
Dr. Bagley, just for the sake of the record, since Ms. Collins has already begun testifying, we would object. She did not request a contested case in this matter. Understanding, however, the council is going to permit those folks to testify. We just want that for the purposes of the record. Thank you.
Thank you for putting that on the record.
Thank you, and I'm
That's good.
actually just about to get to why she didn't do that, but, is this the letter that you submitted to DEQ back in January?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And at the time, did you, ask for an informal conference?
I did.
And that request was denied by DEQ?
It was.
Okay. After that was denied, did you try and participate in a contested case proceeding?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And how did that go?
Not incredibly well. I was actually over my head pretty quickly. The problem is I'm a graduate student, and so I couldn't afford to hire an attorney. Ramen noodle stage.
And you still get some filings related to these cases?
I do. I still get all of the emails and the attachments and all of the things along with it, yes.
Yeah, I've seen your name on some service lists that I confused them. All right. Could you tell us a little bit about your background and experience with coal mining?
Sure. I was a coal miner for a little bit over a decade at Decker Coal Mine.
Okay. And based on that experience, in your opinion, what makes a good operator?
What makes a good operator?
Yeah.
I think a good operator cares about all the stakeholders and doesn't just follow the regulations and that goes over and above that to make sure that the people and the land is taken care of.
Yeah. Based on your experience and your knowledge of the area, are there any impacts you think should be prevented by DEQ with this permit application?
Yeah, actually, there's several things that I'm concerned about. One, for certain, is the blasts from the explosions. I've learned so much this week by being able to listen to everybody. Mr. Emmy talked about the blasts, and we did talk about he got my foundation incorrect on my house. So I am concerned about how the blasts are going to affect the building and also the subsidence in the area. And I don't mean just the mining subsidence behind all of this, but that entire place was a town. Monarch went from the old church all the way to the river, and so there are root cellars and there are subsidences that happen in the road, and I think that potentially that the blast will increase that and worsen that. I'm concerned about the water, both the quality and the quantity of it, both the groundwater and the surface water. There's two for sure.
Yeah. Do you have a well that serves your property or the property in which you live?
I do have a well, and I've had some problems with it, so it's not potable. I don't drink it. I actually haul water from town. I do have two livestock reservoirs that I use that are over on the Long property.
So to go a little bit more into blasting, did you ever see a blast when you worked at the coal mine?
Yes, ma'am, quite a few.
Yeah. So it's a little bit, I don't know, is it clear to you what blasting will look like at the Brook mine?
Yes, it is. I mean, I'm not familiar with the continuous longwall mining operations, but I do know what a coal shot sounds like and looks like, and certainly know what an overburden shot is like. I don't think they're going to be doing any cast blasting, but I know what those are as well.
So I'll ask the same question I asked Mr. Bouillard. If you were sitting in the chair of the director of DEQ down in Cheyenne and making a decision on this permit application, what would you want to see happen?
I would want to make sure that there were things in the permit that covered contingencies that aren't covered by the technical, technical adequacy. Because I've heard a lot about that this weekend, that there's does this meet technical adequacy? And certainly I'm not an expert witness on any of that. I'm kind of more on the practical side of things. And so I know they sell T-shirts that say the engineer is always right, but my experience as a coal miner is there are a lot of contingencies that come up that aren't covered in the models. And so I would want to make sure that there was some kind of wording in the permit that covered the things that the model doesn't cover.
Is there anything else you want to share with the council about your place or your background or your concerns?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the council for coming to be here, because if this would have been held in Cheyenne, I certainly wouldn't have been able to learn as much as I did. And so I thank you for coming to do that. I know that it's been a long few days, and I sure appreciate you being here. I really have felt like there has been something of a disregard and sometimes even an antipathy towards stakeholders like myself, even little tiny stakeholders like myself. And I just mean that the inability to access information, to get people to discuss things has been so difficult. And there is such an adversarial relationship with all of this. It's just ridiculous, and it doesn't need to be. And I sure hope that you all would help provide that leadership to make sure that doesn't happen, because the state of Wyoming can't afford to keep doing it that way. So,
thank you, Brett. I think have you ever approached the company to try and address any of your concerns?
on numerous occasions. Actually, when I first heard about the Brook mine, somebody said, "Is that your mine?" And I said, "What mine?" And I think that would have been maybe 2015, and they told me about a mine, and I figured, well, it must be mine. It's named after me. At that point, I did some research on Ramaco. I sent a couple of emails. I called the office. I've actually been by the office several times, and it's a little bit odd. They leave the door wide open with nobody there. But I was really kind of looking to maybe get a job, because I have had experience as a coal miner. I was certified as a foreman in the state of Montana, and I am just about ready to graduate with my MBA. And so I thought, hey, I could walk to work from there. So I started contacting them about that. I never did hear anything back, and maybe it's because I did say I lived in Monarch. But I know that we had a pre-hearing conference call where the legal counsel said that they would get with their client and be willing to speak with us, and nothing ever came with that. I spoke with Jay Lynn, maybe the PR person that worked in the office, and asked her to contact me and get me some information. Spoke with Mr. Behrens.
Is it Shalene?
Shalene, okay. Mr. Behrens, and certainly Niles, for a year, has been promising me he would come by and have coffee and tell me about why I shouldn't be worried about the blasting.
You mentioned just a moment ago that you originally wanted to get a job from the company, but you still work for them?
Well, it sure depends on how their philosophy ends up panning out. I'd be a great mine manager, I think.
Anything else you would like to share today with the council?
I guess I have a great appreciation as I've listened through to everybody's testimony about the technical parts of it and the models. And I know what strong software we have now to make predictions and do forecasting. But there really are a whole lot of things that aren't covered. And I would say that comes from practical experience. And what I mean by that is I just finally got access to the entire mine plan, I guess, Monday, and was able to look at it, particularly volume 11, although 3 was a really good volume too. And there are numbers that stick in my head, like the water usage, the daily water usage. It says some 300,000, I think, a day, gallons a day. And the thing that stuck in my mind was the 220,000 for dust suppression. And I've spent thousands of hours on a water truck, and I know that you can use that in about an hour and a half. And so I know that you can go through 1 million gallons of water when it's hot and it's windy. But then in the summertime or in the wintertime, maybe you only go through 50 gallons to do dust suppression. And I suppose the middle ground there is 220,000, however that's figured with formulas. It's when it's a lot more than that and a lot less than that, then it's going to start affecting us, the residents that live there, because they're going to have way too much water and they're going to have not enough water. And most of the technical aspects that I see are really kind of the Goldilocks thing. And I'm just concerned that the permit doesn't cover when the Goldilocks things aren't there. And I'd sure hope that they would take a look at that.
Okay, thanks, Rick. I have no more questions for you at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Mr. Gilbert?
No questions.
Mr. Sutton? Oh, Mr. Pope?
Thank you, Dr. Beck. Good morning, Ms. Collins.
Good morning.
My name is Jeff Pope. I'm an attorney here on behalf of Ramaco. We haven't had the chance to meet today, so it's nice to meet you.
Thank you.
I want to follow up on something you mentioned just a moment ago. I think I heard you say that you just got access this Monday to the mine plan. Is that accurate?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So just to sort of understand what you've done here, when you prepared your objection letter, had you reviewed the permit application?
No, I couldn't find it.
So for example, you were not aware, then I take it that there was a paper copy on file at the Department of Environmental Quality?
No.
Were you also aware that the department had circulated an electronic copy, at least to the folks who were parties in this contested case?
No, I was not.
Similar question about what you did in preparing your objection letter. Did you review any Wyoming statutes or regulations in preparing that letter?
In preparing my objection letter, I relied entirely on my experience as a coal miner and living in the vicinity and experience. Sorry, I relied entirely on my experience as a coal miner and living there in the area.
And I appreciate that, Ms. Collins. And unfortunately, for the sake of the record, I just have to get the precise answer. So is it fair to say that you did not look at Wyoming statutes or regulations in preparing your objection letter?
Not until now. I actually have a copy of it now. I'm kind of a nerd. I enjoy reading it.
Fair enough. Let's talk a moment about blasting. I heard you had some concerns about that, both in your letter and what you've said here today. And I understand you just got a full copy on Monday, so if you're not aware, it's okay to say that too. Are you aware that inside its permit application, Brook Mine has a blasting plan?
Yes, I am.
And are you aware that there are statutes and regulations in Wyoming that control what types, what frequency, and what intensity the Brook Mine can use to blast?
Yes, I am.
Are you aware that Brook Mine has to publish a blasting schedule?
Yes, I am.
I'll keep trying to say Brook Mine to
Thank
avoid
you.
confusion. Are you aware that the Brook Mine will also have fences, signs, and sirens inside the permit boundary to keep people out and notify people about blasting?
Yes, I am.
And are you aware that Brook Mine has a commitment in its permit application to protect engineered structures like the Old Catholic Church from blasting?
Yes, in volume 11 is a PDF. It's on page 338, which made me really aggravated that I had to read through that much to get to the one piece of paper that somebody could have told me about much sooner. Yes, I am aware of that.
And I'm sure from your experience at the Decker Mine, you're probably also aware that folks who live within the half-mile buffer around the Brook permit boundary can request a pre-blast survey of a house, for example, right?
Yes.
Now, I think you mentioned that the church you have restored was built in 1919, is that correct?
1923.
I'm sorry, 1923. And I apologize, I may have been a little confused because you mentioned it had been burned down a couple of times and rebuilt. I just want to make sure. The church that was built in 1923, was that built on the same location we're looking at in this photo?
This is the one that was built in 1923.
Thank you. You're aware that after 1923, the Bighorn coal mine operated nearby where the proposed Brook Mine is, right?
Yes.
You're aware that the Bighorn coal mine did blasting as part of its operations in that area.
I am.
Let's talk about the water issues you raised in your objection letter and here today. Again, understanding you just had the permit on Monday. Are you aware that Brook's permit application contains a dewatering plan?
I am.
And are you aware that within the permit application, Brook Mine has studied the impacts of the mine on domestic sources of water?
Yes, I'm aware of that.
Did you happen to, and I realize I'm asking for a specific page here, but it sounds like you're familiar with the
I may
pages.
know it, I don't know.
Did you have the chance to look at page MP-47, which discusses the expected impact on domestic water users in the area?
I would have to look at it, but I do know that I read that. I was able to identify which well was mine and looked through all of those charts and through all of that
I'm
commentary.
sorry, I can't hear.
I did look through all of that and identified which of those wells was mine and looked through all of the different tables and the commentary on it.
And do you recall that the Brook Mines studies and models revealed that the impact on domestic sources of water would be low?
Yes,
And you've sat through the hearing, so I'm sure you've heard this before, but are you aware that the Brook Mine permit application has a commitment to replace both water quantity and water quality that may be adversely impacted by the mine?
I am, but it doesn't specify anything about how you determine whether or not Brook Mine is responsible for it and where the burden of that proof is.
And that's a great point, and it's a great segue to transition to the next set of my questions. You mentioned near the close of your testimony that there are sometimes unknowns and contingencies that may be encountered as part of mining operations based on your experience at the Decker mine, right?
Yes, sir.
Would you agree with me that the permit application and the mining process in Wyoming is designed somewhat to be general to allow operators flexibility to deal with contingencies?
Would you say that again?
It's a long question. I will only ask it two questions instead of one. Would you agree with me that mining operators need flexibility to address contingencies in operations?
Yes, sir. As an MBA, I absolutely understand the importance of
I'm
that.
sorry?
As an MBA, I totally understand the importance of that.
Would you also agree that the permit a mine operates under also needs to be a little bit general in nature to provide operational flexibility?
Yes.
Let's talk about roads, and I realize you and Ms. Anderson didn't discuss roads, but I believe you talk about them in your objection letter, so I just want to ask you a few questions about those. And again, understanding you just had the application on Monday. Are you aware that the mine plan document contains a transportation network narrative and map?
I was told that was in there. I'm not sure I actually saw that. There's a huge part about secondary roads, tertiary roads, but I didn't actually see where any of the roads were.
You also, you talked about driving a water truck and dust suppression issues. In your review of the permit application, did you happen to find Brook Mine's dust suppression plan?
No, I didn't see the dust suppression. I just saw how many gallons they were planning on using for dust suppression in a day.
Similar question here. In your review of the permit application, did you also come across, excuse me, the Brook Mine whole dust suppression plan?
I don't know.
Thank you, Ms. Collins. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Pope. Mr. Marock.
Good morning, Brooke.
Good morning.
Again, like I said with Mr. Booyak, thank you so much for coming and for your testimony. We really appreciate you taking time to speak with us. Just one question. Is there anything or any concerns or problems that you haven't yet addressed now that we're here on the record you want to talk about?
No, my primary concern is to just make sure that the contingencies that aren't covered in the models do somehow get covered in the permit to protect the local residents.
Thank you. You have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Rock. Ms. Dungarden?
No questions.
Council, any questions? Deb? Megan?
Something that Brook said, that they wouldn't be able to replace engineered structure.
I'm sorry.
Brook stated that they would replace, or the law stated they would, replace engineered structures. Being that your house was built in 1923, is it an engineered structure?
Is it what?
An engineered structure?
I don't know what the legal definition of an engineered structure is.
Any questions, Nick? Nope. I have no questions, but I want to thank you as well for being here today. Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, Dr. Bradley. Brooke, I just have one more question for you, similar to the question I asked John. So a moment ago, you were just visiting a little bit with the attorneys for the company about the pre-blast survey and what that means. Do you think there's a difference between remediating environmental harm versus preventing it?
I think there's a huge difference.
And can you explain what you mean, I guess, for your structure too with blast?
Sure, I just learned yesterday really that, well, actually it would have been Tuesday morning in looking at the volume 11, where I have been kind of concerned because I didn't think I was going to be able to afford a pre-blast survey to even find out, to have a baseline for that. And then through the process of all of this, I've learned that I'm not the one responsible for paying for that, and I'm pretty happy about that. And I did speak with Mr. Emmy, and he talked about putting his great willingness to put seismographic monitors around, because I think it'll be real important to notice immediately if it starts really shaking that building. Unlike some of the other homes, if things start rattling in my house, it's because the walls are falling down. So I would be very interested in making sure that there is something in place where if it's going to start doing structural damage, that they won't continue to do that.
So did I just hear you that would you ask the council maybe to have the seismographs as a condition of approval for the permit application?
Ooh, I would love that.
That's all I have for you. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Collins.
Sir.
Let us recess for 10 minutes. Be back at 9:50.
Yeah.
We're not sure it's yours. Was yours, your mic that's speaking on that? So you did. Yeah. We thought maybe it was getting it from here. We're not sure. It may have been bouncing off. I can try to keep it back and forth. That's what
Okay, we are back in session. Ms. Anderson, please call your next witness.
Thank you, Dr. Bagley. I call Mr. Anton Bosick.
Dr. Bagley, well, Mr. Bosick comes up here, we'll put on the record again our objection to folks who did not request a contested case. That's already been explained before.
Great, thank you.
Sir, I'll have you raise your right hand. You solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Anton. Could you please say and spell your name for the record?
Anton Joseph Bosick, Anton Boceck.
Could you also state your address and explain where you live?
The address that I live in is 11 Slater Creek Lane, Ranchester, Wyoming.
Mr. Bosick, I have on the screen here Exhibit 77 of ours. Could you tell us a little bit about what we're looking at?
That's the picture of our family farm that my brothers and sister and children and nephews are part of. That was a farm that my grandparents bought in 1920, and it's been in the family ever since. And it is in part of the, within the half mile of the mine land.
So you've lived out there your whole life?
I have,
And you've raised kids out there?
yes.
And you were with your parents their whole lives?
Yes,
Or
it
at
was.
least your whole life with them?
Yes,
So this is an important place to you, right?
it is.
Okay. I'm going to pull a DQ Exhibit 12, page 145. This is a map we've been looking at a little bit this morning and yesterday. Is this kind of geographic area familiar to you on this map?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Could you point out approximately where you live on this map? Can you blow it out a little bit more?
Well, it's, yeah, I just need to see where the, I can't tell where the Slater Creek Lane is on this. It would have to be in this area here.
Okay. Approximately, how far do you live from, there's looks like a town of Monarch on this map?
I'm probably to the a quarter mile, across the river to Monarch.
Okay. So you live between the river and the interstate?
Yes,
And does your property abut the frontage road?
the property doesn't, but it is close to the frontage road.
Okay. If you would travel home from here today, this hearing, what roads would you use?
I-90, and then I'd take I-90 and get onto Highway 345, which would be the frontage road.
So that the frontage road is the main access to your property?
Yes, that's the only one.
It's the only one. Okay. Are you familiar that the mine would maybe use that frontage road at times during its operation?
Yes.
Do you have any concerns about that?
Yes, I do. Those, the extra traffic on that road would certainly be a concern. We've had, in a few years ago, they had some interstate work which diverted a lot of the traffic back onto that road, and it was quite dangerous. We had some close calls because of the extra traffic, extra speed.
Is there anything you would like to tell the council about maybe requirements or conditions that would be useful in the permit related to the use of that road? You given that any thought?
I haven't, other than, consideration that, maybe the speed limits and weight limits on that, especially in those areas, with the extra traffic and extra weight on it.
Are you concerned that, did you hear some testimony here this week about that the company really hasn't reached out to the Department of Transportation?
Wasn't here that day.
Okay. You also have a little bit of background with coal mining. Can
Yes.
you tell us about that?
Yes, I'd worked at Bighorn Coal, for about 14 years. Started out as a laborer, ran, some heavy equipment, haul trucks, coal trucks, and then I was on the blasting crew for several years.
So you were on the blasting crew. Did that background help inform any of your concerns about this proposal here today?
It did. With mine doing blasting, I'm concerned about foundations in my well and the well on the family farm.
Yeah, so I think, we've heard a little bit about from the company that Bighorn Coal's operations were all good and weren't any impacts in the area. Would you agree with that?
Objection, we have not presented that testimony. We've only presented testimony that Bighorn Coal operated in the area.
That is correct.
Okay, then that's fine, Dr. Bagley. I'll rephrase. Anton, in your experience on those blasting crews, were there ever any problems?
There were some neighbors that had well issues, that had wells re-drilled because of the blasting.
And that history that you have, that's helped inform why maybe you're concerned about blasting that happened at the Brook mine.
Yes, especially the proximity of the mine to my house and the family farm. It's actually closer than what Bighorn Coal was to these people that did have some problems.
When you were on those blasting crews, did you see pollution from blasting?
We did have some issues at times with nitrous oxide gas, especially in wet areas.
And do you have any concerns about that happening?
Yes, I would. It's another issue that, especially where it's going to be right across the interstate from my home.
Do you have any concerns about blasting for vibrations and impact to structures?
I would. Again, my house is only 1/10 of a mile off of the Highway 345, so it's not too far across the interstate. And the family farm, the house that is there is a block structure, and there's a barn that's approximately 100 years old with rock taken from the area that is the foundation of that barn.
Is there anything you'd like to tell the council about maybe conditions they could consider for blasting, like seismographs?
I would like to have consideration that we would have a seismograph at both places.
Yeah, and your experience with blasting in the past, were they useful? Do you ever know about?
I don't. I didn't know of any one that did have them.
Could you tell us a little bit about the water sources for your property?
My water well is close to 500 foot deep. It is an artesian well. I'd hate to have that loss. The family farm's well is shallower. It's under 200 feet, but both would be a concern to if we had some disturbance on those wells.
Yeah. Do you think there would be an adequate replacement source of water in the area?
I don't know. I know my well has, I built my home in 78 and it's been a good well. It's good water. If something happened to that aquifer, it may be hard to replace the source and the quality of water.
So I know you know a little bit about Slater Creek, right?
Yes.
Do you have any concerns about any surface water impacts?
I do. Slater Creek flows right out my backyard. It's within probably 100 feet or so of the house. Mining on Slater Creek or in that area could greatly concern would concern me with the water issues.
I think it's been represented that Slater Creek is an intermittent stream. Do you remember hearing that at all this week? Or?
I heard it. I wasn't here when the testimony was made, but.
Yeah. But would you agree with that?
You know, it flows, Slater Creek flows through our property for probably 600 yards or better. And I've lived there 65 years and I've never seen it dry up. It slows up depending on years, but it has never dried up in that area.
Anton, I'm pulling up our Exhibit 2. I'm going to display it. Do you recognize this letter?
Yes.
I have to scroll down.
You might have to go up with my name.
Okay. Is this the letter that you sent the DEQ back in January?
It is.
At the time, what did you think was going to happen with this letter?
Well, I was hoping that we may get a public hearing that all the landowners might be able to speak and address our concerns.
Since that time, has anybody from DEQ reached out to you about any of your concerns?
No.
As the company?
No.
Have you, do you have anything to say about that?
Well, I just think that the new kid on the block, it'd be nice to have him come talk to all the neighbors and those that are going to be affected by this mine.
Is there anything else you'd like to add or share with the council?
No, I just, I'm really concerned about the water issues and the foundation issues, the air quality and the water quality being affected in this area. I believe that the Slater Creek area is being taken too lightly. That stream can be quite a raging torrent at times, depending on the snowfall, the rainfall. I've seen it in the 3rd of July being quite severe over the banks because of rain.
I think that's all I have for you this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Mr. Gilbert.
I don't believe I have any questions.
Yep. Mr. Pope.
Good morning, Mr. Bosek.
Morning.
We had the chance to meet a couple of weeks ago at your deposition. Good to see you again. I'd like to start just some clarification from you on a couple of issues. As we discussed at the deposition, you did not assist the Powder River Basin Resource Council in preparing its objection letter, right?
No.
And at least at the time it was sent out, you had not reviewed that one.
No.
And at the time we spoke at your deposition, you didn't have an opinion about that letter, right?
No.
So with that established, let's talk about the letter that's on the screen right now.
Okay.
It's true, Mr. Bosek, that in preparing your objection letter, you didn't read the entirety of Brook's permit application, right?
Right.
And you also did not go and review the paper copy on file with the Department of Environmental Quality.
No.
As a result, you also didn't review any of the correspondence related to the permit, right?
Right.
You also, in preparing your objection letter, didn't look at the comments and responses between the Brook Mine and DEQ, right?
Right.
You also did not review any Wyoming statutes, right?
Right.
You also didn't review any Wyoming regulations.
That's correct.
There are some objections in the objection letter about fires, but you did not review Brook's fire control plan, right?
Right.
As you just mentioned a moment ago, you have some concerns, and they're mentioned in the objection letter about water wells.
Yes.
But you did not review in the permit application Brook's commitment to replacing water quantity and quality, right?
Right.
You also talked about blasting a moment ago, but you don't know what type of blasting Brook intends to do in the mine.
At this point, no.
You mentioned some air pollution issues a moment ago. You haven't reviewed Brook's air quality permit, right?
No, I haven't.
Similar question about the air. There's some concerns in your objection letter about dust. You did not review Brook's dust control plan.
No.
Again, the objection letter also mentions water treatment issues, but you haven't reviewed the water treatment plan in the Brook Mine permit application, right?
Right.
You expressed in this objection letter some concerns about night mining. You haven't reviewed any plans in the Brook permit application about night mining.
No.
Again, sticking with the objection letter, you've also expressed some concerns about facilities, but you did not review the facilities loadout section of the permit application.
No.
You and Ms. Anderson spoke about roads, but you did not review the transportation network portion of Brook's permit application, right?
Not entirely.
So, for example, you didn't know that Brook has to have a licensed engineer certify and design the haul roads, right?
No.
You didn't review the reclamation plan either, did you?
I did not.
So, for example, you didn't review water quality data that's contained in the permit application.
No.
You talked a little bit about the Slater Creek, and mentioned some concerns about that. You did not review any sections in the mine permit application that had to do with the Brook Mine's impact on streams and rivers, right?
No.
You didn't review Brook's water runoff plan.
No.
Let's go back to the objection letter for a moment, Mr. Bosek. You expressed some concerns about the Brook bond calculation in the letter, right?
I did.
You did not, however, review Brook's bond calculation.
No.
You didn't. You don't have any experience, for example, doing reclamation cost estimates.
I do not.
You didn't review guideline 12 in the DEQ guidelines.
I didn't.
You also don't know how much land Brook will disturb in the first year of operations, right?
No, I don't.
And at least at the time of your deposition, you didn't know that the Department of Environmental Quality will review Brook's bond calculation on an annual basis.
No.
You also didn't know that as part of that review, DEQ can recalculate the amount of the bond for the mine, right?
Right.
And as I understand it, Mr. Bosek, part of the reason that you didn't look at some of these things was you counted on people like Ms. Anderson and the executive director of the Powder River Basin Resource Council to address those issues. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Getting back to the objection letter for just a moment, you had some subsidence-related concerns in there too, right?
I do.
But you did not review any subsidence data in Brook's permit application, right?
No.
And sticking with the theme of data, you didn't review any data outside what you looked at in the permit, right?
That's correct.
As Mr. Sutphin did, I forgot to ask a few questions before I transition from this section. Let's go back to blasting for just a second. You mentioned that you worked for Bighorn Coal and you were on their blasting crew, right?
Yes.
And as I understand it, you said your family moved to the property in about 1920, is that right?
My grandparents bought that property, yes.
And since 1920, I think you said you built your house in 1978?
Yes,
And your water well in that area has, I think you said, flowed ever since then. Is that accurate?
yes.
You would agree with me that Bighorn Coal has blasted near the area of the proposed Brook mine since 1978?
Well, they have blasted, yes, but quite some distance away.
I think we can wrap up on this point, Mr. Bosek. You would agree with me that if the Brook mine complies with all relevant Wyoming statutes and regulations, it should receive a permit to mine coal.
I believe I said that.
Thank you, Mr. Bosek. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Pope. Mr. Ross.
Good morning, Mr. Bosek.
Morning.
Just the same question I'm going to be asking everyone today. After this whole week, do you have any comments or questions or concerns or any proposed conditions that you would like this council to consider or would like to put on the record?
I would. I believe with all the neighbors are concerned with foundations and water wells. I believe that we should all be considered in this plan and permit that should anything happen with those foundations or wells, they would be replaced. And the problem with some of that is companies come and go. And, if somebody has to have water hauled to them, are they going to do that for a lifetime or the lifetime of the company? That's a concern.
Okay. Is there anything else?
Other than, like I say, the foundations and dust control and subsidence issues, those are my main concerns.
Okay. Thank you very much. We have no further questions.
Thank you. Ms. Boonberg.
No questions.
Council members. Dick.
No questions.
Megan.
I have one question. In your letter, you stated you were concerned about dust. Are you concerned about dust from the mine or on your county road?
Dust from the mine. The road that goes by me is a paved road.
Any other questions?
That's it.
All right, thank you. Deb? Mr. Bosek, thank you for being here. I do have one question. You mentioned that your well, 500 feet deep and artesian, which is great. Do you happen to know what aquifer it goes into?
I do not.
That's all the questions I have.
Okay.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, Dr. Bagley. I just have a couple more questions for you, Anton. So there's a long line of questions you just got asked about your lack of review of the permit application. You have a day job?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Well, what do you do in your day job?
I'm a mine manager for a ranch west of Sheridan, so it's full time. I get home late and really don't have the time to look at all this.
Yeah. Are you aware that our organization requested at one time that the permit application be available after working hours?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Do you think it's reasonable to expect a nearby landowner to have to read the whole permit application to be able to submit an objection letter to the Department of Environmental Quality?
No, I don't. I got the letter from the Western Water Consultants, and my concerns were just what I've spoke about, not from reading documents, it's from living there and the concerns that I have to continue to live under the good conditions I am now.
Yeah, so you believe it's an important public participation right that you have to write that letter?
Yes.
Okay. A moment ago, you were just asked about blasting at Bighorn Coal and your experience with that versus maybe blasting that could happen at the Brook mine. I'm pulling back up DEQ Exhibit 12, page 145. Are you aware that these orange areas on the map are the, basically surface mining areas of the proposed mining operation?
No, I am now.
Okay. Would you agree that, are those closer than Bighorn Coal to your property?
Yes,
Lot closer or?
quite a bit closer. I drove 3 miles from my house to the Bighorn Coal office. The blasting was probably, half to 3/4 of a mile farther than that. So yes, they would be quite a bit closer.
And does that concern you?
It does.
All right, thank you. Answering this slide.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bozek.
Thank you.
Thank you. I call Jillian Malone.
Mr. Chairman, we would just like to lodge our standing objection to these witnesses.
Thank you.
Have you raised your right hand? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Hi, Jillian.
Hi.
Could you say and spell your name for the record?
Yes, my name is Jillian, spelled Gillian, Malone, Malone.
Hey. I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about our organization. Are you currently serving on the board of directors?
I am.
And when did you become a member of the organization?
I became a member in 1973. I'm actually the youngest founding member of Powder River. I happened to be working for a founding member at the time, Sally Forbes, who had Beckton Stock Farm. And I was supposed to be indexing Red Angus cows, but instead I was clipping newspaper articles about strip mining and doing things assorted jobs associated with getting this organization going. So I've been involved for pretty much the whole time, on and off. I've been off, going away to school or whatever, but whenever I've been here, I've been involved with Powder River.
How else have you been involved in the organization over the years?
Well, I have served on the board more than once. I believe I was on the board back in the 80s for a term. I was board chair 3 years ago, I believe, for a couple of years. And I serve on a variety of committees. We have a local foods committee. We have just a lot of different, we have an ag committee, local internal fundraising. We do a lot of, gatherings, trying to raise money to keep this organization going. So just a variety of issues.
Yeah. Could you explain a little bit about our organizational mission?
Yeah. I might be able to say this. Our mission is a commitment to the conservation of our unique land, mineral, water, and clean air resources, consistent with the responsible use of those resources to sustain present and future populations, generations. And also, we work to educate and empower our citizens in the state of Wyoming to raise a coherent voice in decisions that will impact their environment and lifestyle. So that's quite a bundle, but it's basically what we do, and everything that we do is based on that mission.
We have a long mission statement, so I appreciate you summarizing that. Does our organization have any history with coal mining?
Well, as I said, I was working for Sal Forbes when strip mining came to the Powder River Basin. So yes, we have an intimate history with coal mining. And in fact, we were instrumental in getting the Federal Strip Mine Act passed. One of our founding members was present at the Rose Garden ceremony and signing, which was a great honor for this man who was a rancher in the Gillette area and fought and fought and fought for his ranch and for that legislation.
So back at the time and maybe even today, what would you say are the organizational goals?
I would say that they are making sure that coal mines adhere to the laws that are in place to protect water, clean air, neighboring landowners, and the citizens of Wyoming as a whole in terms of royalties and, you know, getting our taxes that come from coal paid and to sustain the state itself. That's basically been our approach. Bonding, make sure that the bonding is adequate to ensure reclamation. We've had quite a few issues with that lately, as everybody knows.
Yeah. Could you tell us a little bit about how our organization works with landowners?
We work with landowners. Generally, if an issue comes up, we get approached by landowners. That's often how our membership happens, how we get members, is somebody will approach us with a problem and we get involved based on that and also based on what the board of directors decides. Everything that we do has to go before the board, and we decide based on how our mission is involved and how landowners are going to be impacted. Basically, just the way the mission states it. We educate them, we act as a liaison at times between landowners and the state and the feds. We work with them in a partnership. We talk to them, we educate ourselves based on their experiences, because we consider the landowners to be the experts in the area of expertise where they live, for instance. They know the most about it. So we learn a lot from them. It's kind of an exchange.
Would you say that our involvement in this proceeding and with this proposed coal mine is a good example of how we work with landowners?
This is an excellent example of how we work with landowners, particularly in this difficult, I would say a difficult proposal wherein it's been hard to get the information that landowners need in order to move on with their lives. You need to know what's going to happen in your backyard if you're going to be able to sleep at night. And we have not gotten that with this proposal. So we got involved on that basis. We started looking for information, and it seemed as though the harder we looked for information, the less information there was, or the information was changing. It was hard to determine what this mine was going to be, how much coal they were going to mine, what they were going to use the coal for. And so it's been kind of a moving target. And so we've encountered quite a few difficulties with this situation, and we feel that it's more than ever important that we're involved for our landowners and for the community of Sheridan. I mean, this proposal is 8 miles outside of Sheridan, and we haven't seen a coal mine for quite a few years. And, you know, this is historically a rich cultural historic area of mining, but other than Bighorn Coal and something out at Youngs Creek, I believe, that's going still, which is, you know, on the Montana border, there really hasn't been a coal mine around here for decades. And frankly, we're kind of wondering why there's a coal mine now when coal mines are closing, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense to us. And so we're having to sleuth it out as best we can to try to find out what landowners and citizens of this county can expect.
Did the board of directors approve our objection to the permit application of the Brook?
Yes, we did.
I have up on the screen our Exhibit 1. Is this the objection letter that our organization sent to DEQ on?
Yes, it
Or
is.
actually hand-delivered to DEQ on January 27th, 2017?
Yep,
Have you seen this letter?
I have.
Could you tell me a little bit about why the board approved our organizational objections to the permit application?
Well, I think it was largely because of all the unanswered questions, and because there seemed to be significant gaps in the permit application. And I know we've gone through this over and over and over this week. I don't need to go into a lot of detail about it, but there are gaps in baseline information, hydrology, and, what the blasting will be, all of the things that we've discussed this week. We just don't feel that they were adequately covered in the permit application.
What has our organization done to address those concerns?
Well, we have hired a couple of experts who unfortunately have not been able to testify because we're running out of time.
Anyway.
But we did hire them, and we have relied on their research and their knowledge to determine that, yes, there are issues with this application, and that we need to delve into it a lot deeper, that the company needs to delve into these things a lot deeper and provide a lot more information before the application, the permit is granted.
All right, I'd like to switch over a little bit to talk about your personal experience with this area. Can you tell us a little bit about why you're personally concerned about the proposed line?
Well, as a citizen, I like to recreate. Hiking is my favorite thing. And I get out and walk my dog and walk in areas around the county. I like to explore new areas. And a few years ago, when John Booyak opened up the walk-in area number 7, which I believe is, and I am definitely directionally challenged, but there is some help. So I believe, is this walk-in 7? I think it is. There's the interstate, there's Clean Burn right there. So there's recreation available here. There's a fishing pond. There are a bunch of little trails that go along the bottom here and along the Tongue River. You can also hike up in the hills above here. I believe that's a state section. And then there's John Booyak's walk-in area, which takes you back partly along the Tongue, and then it kind of branches out, and you can go way up on top of the hill where you can look one direction towards the mountains, beautiful view of the Bighorns, and then the other direction you look out towards, Montana, and I assume that if there were to be a mine developed there, it would be pretty visible from that site as well. But lots of opportunities for birding. Went in there a couple weeks ago, saw a pair of golden eagles and a juvenile, which was really fun. Saw a spotted towhee and saw western tanager, all the birds that are coming back for the summer. Anyway, it's a unique area. I mean, not that it's not without some impact, because historically it was a mining area. So there's some debris lying around from the past. I mean, in those days they didn't take those old culverts out, and so I don't know if the council had a chance to get out there and get a just a little site visit or not, but I certainly recommend it. It's a nice area. It allows you to go, especially the Clean Burn area and up on the south-facing slopes. You can go up there in the winter when the sun is hitting those slopes in the snow gets blown off by the wind, you can hike up above there. I'm assuming, though, that if this mine were to go forward, I think it was, what was the blasting expert? I think he said that that area could be off limits during mining because of the dangers from blasting and just an active coal mine. So that would be a shame, but right now I enjoy going there.
Yeah, and you would go back.
Yeah, at this point, I would go back. I'm not sure I'd go back if it was an active coal mine. I mean, if I could go back even.
Do you believe recreation areas like these add value to our county?
I do. You know, people are moving to Sheridan County for the recreational opportunities. Young people are moving here to raise families, and we have a lot of retirees that are moving here. A lot of them are coming to be with their kids who already live here, which is kind of interesting. Kids are moving back home because they're realizing after being out in the world that this is a pretty wonderful community, and we have lots of arts and entertainment amenities and all these recreational opportunities. So yeah, this is not a coal mine community.
On that, do you have any concerns about changing the land from a recreation agriculture use to a more industrial use?
Yes. You know, when you come down the interstate from Billings and you come, approaching Sheridan, that's going to be, if that mine goes in on the side of the interstate there, that's going to be people's view of this community when they come in. That's just, I don't know, doesn't really rest very well with me. The other thing is, what about blasting? Are you going to be able to shut down the interstate when they're blasting? Because it's going to be that close as far as I can gather. I do have those concerns. I think it has too many complications with all the past mining activity, which would only be exacerbated by a new mine. I worry about the dangers from people out there. I know John referred to that yesterday when he talked about his walk-in area, that he would be concerned to have people out there when there's an active mine and, if there's blasting and there's no way to notify recreationists. I think that would be a concern of mine as well if I were a landowner there.
Do you believe there was enough done by the mine and its proposed permit application to protect recreation values of the area?
I don't think they've done anything to protect recreation values. Not that I'm aware of. I think that some of those recreation areas would perhaps be closed. I'm guessing they would have to be closed because of liability, nothing else. I know that also the local community land trust has put a lot of their own resources into that area in terms of, taking old cars out of the bank of the Tongue River and making a safer passage for boaters. They removed an old bridge structure that was impeding people in canoes and kayaks. Made it a lot safer and a lot more visually appealing. Spent a lot of volunteer time and money on that. And it seems like a sad situation that's going to be.
What does our organization want to have happen with this proposal? What's our goal?
I think our goal here is, at a minimum, to make sure that Brook Mine steps up with what they really are going to do, first of all, and that I know we're not supposed to be talking about it, but I have to talk about it because as a citizen and as a member of the board of Powder River, we're here for the long term. We're not here for, the next 5 years or whatever, however this mine lasts, we're here for the long term. And especially the landowners who live in that area are there. They hope for the long term. They hope that their lives won't be disrupted to the extent that they would have to move or, haul water from town or, whatever. There are too many unknowns. I believe that Brook needs to go back to the drawing board, do all those baseline studies that have been indicated as necessary by our experts and by many people that have testified during this week, including Mr. Gerlach. And maybe they should come forward with that information before they're granted a permit to mine. I don't think a permit with conditions is enough.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have for you this time.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Mr. Gilbert.
No question.
Thank you. Mr. Sutton.
Good morning, Ms. Malone. How are you today?
Hello again.
Hello again. You remember at your deposition, we talked about the comments you made at a local county commission meeting, right?
Yes.
And among other things, you told the county commission you, quote, smell a rat, unquote. Remember that?
Yeah.
You still smell a rat, don't you, Ms. Malone?
Well, one tends to smell a rat if nobody's coming forward to say who they are.
We can make this really easy. It's a
Okay.
yes or no. You still smell a rat?
Yes, I still smell a rat, a stinking rat.
Okay. And that's true even though you've sat through this entire week of testimony, right?
Yes,
And you've heard from all of the experts at the Department of Environmental Quality, right?
ad nauseum.
But isn't that what you wanted, Ms. Malone? You wanted to hear from all the experts,
I
right?
would have liked to have heard from our experts.
And just so the record is clear, you will have an opportunity to have your experts heard, isn't
I
that
know
right?
that, I know that.
Okay. So, at the time you filed your objection letter with the Department of Environmental Quality, you had not read any piece of the permit file, right?
Right,
And so, all of the objections that are based on that are in your objection letter were certainly not based on any of the terms you read in the permit, true?
except for the ones that are, I relied on Powder River Basin Resource Council's expertise and the expertise of our experts to give me that information. I trusted that information based on their expertise. And also, a lot of that stuff was mentioned in our objection letter, the council's objection letter.
I don't want to be rude, Ms. Malone, but the question's really pretty straightforward. Your objections were not based on anything you read, true?
Except for the stuff that I read in our objection letter.
Okay, I see why we're getting crosswise here.
Yeah,
So your objection was not based on anything that you read personally in the permit file, true?
right.
Okay. You just testified that at a minimum, you believe that Brook Mine should be forced to go back to the drawing board, right?
Yes,
Okay. And that's what, I believe you're testifying on behalf of the Powder River Basin Resource Council when you say that, true?
I really have that opinion as a citizen primarily.
But isn't it true that at your deposition, you told me that you believe the only good thing here to happen is no mining, right?
Ideally,
And in fact, I think you said that coal mines are incompatible with recreation, right?
this coal mine. And this is, again, me as a citizen.
I appreciate that,
Okay.
and I agree.
Yeah.
You don't believe that you as a citizen will be able to safely recreate in the vicinity of the Brook Mine, right?
I have that concern.
But you do know that there is currently recreation ongoing up at the Tongue River Reservoir, right?
I assume there is. I don't go there much either.
Okay? But you would have to agree with me, right, that the Tongue River Reservoir is straddled on both sides by the Decker Mine, right?
I know you can see the mine from there.
And you're not aware of any recreational users that have been harmed or otherwise injured as a result of... Can I at least finish my question? Thank you. You're not aware of any recreational users on the Tongue River Reservoir that have been injured or otherwise harmed as a result of the Decker mining operations, are you?
Well, I do know that people that swim in that reservoir end up with burning eyes. There's methane being released into that water. I would not swim in that reservoir.
Understood. You also would have to acknowledge that the Decker mine operation is larger than the operation proposed by the Brook mine, right?
I assume so, yes.
You've talked a little bit about blasting, and I think that's one of the reasons you're afraid to recreate out in the area of the Brook mine if it's approved, right?
I have concerns about that, yes.
And I think one of the concerns you expressed, and maybe it wasn't today, maybe it was at your deposition, but that you're afraid you won't get notice, right?
Well, it depends on, yes.
But you do understand that the Brook mine will be required to put something in the newspaper notifying the public about the blasting, right?
I am aware of that, but I don't even read the newspaper. Not
Okay.
the,
But you're also aware, aren't you, that in addition to the publication in the newspaper, Brook mine will be required to post signs at the perimeter of its mine, right?
yes.
And that they'll have to have sirens and warning signals, right?
I don't know, but maybe.
Okay, and you
If you
don't
say
know,
so.
and you don't know because you didn't read the permit.
Exactly.
So you probably don't know that they're also required to have security patrols going around to make sure the area is clear, right?
Oh, that makes me feel more comfortable.
You mentioned that you don't know if they're going to have to shut down the interstate for blasting. You remember that?
I just said that today.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's all speculative.
Okay. And again, you didn't read the permit to find out either.
Nobody knows. To my knowledge, nobody knows.
Let me ask that question again. Again, it's really...
No, I didn't.
Okay, thank you. I noticed you didn't bring up really specifics about your wildlife objection today, right?
I talked about birding.
Okay, but you don't actually have any information from the Brook mine that you base your opinion on that birding might be affected, right?
Not from their application.
In fact, the real basis for all of your objections is what you've seen in other mines, right?
Probably. Yes or no?
Well, no, Ms. Malone, I don't, please don't make me get your deposition out, I guess.
Okay, please don't.
Okay. You testified at your deposition that it was based on, that your objections were based on what you had seen at other mines, right?
Some of my objections.
Okay. And again, you didn't take the time to study or understand what Brook Mine is proposing to do out at its mine, right?
If it's of any interest to you, I have read it since then.
I appreciate
I
hearing
put it
that.
in my bathroom because it was hard to take the time otherwise. Sorry, but
Ms. Malone, the questions and concerns that you have
Sorry.
raised, you did not talk to Brook Mine about those concerns, did you?
not directly, no. There's nobody to talk to.
And nor did you talk to Mr. Jeff Barron about those concerns, did you?
Now, which concerns are we talking?
Any of the issues and
Any of the
concerns?
issues I brought up? Okay.
Ms. Malone, let's slow down just a tiny bit for
Okay.
the sake of Kathy, the
Sorry,
court
Kathy.
reporter.
Sorry.
And let me ask the question, and I'll let you answer the question, okay? You did not take any of the concerns you have expressed in your objection letter directly to Mr. Jeff Barrett, correct?
Correct.
Nor did you take any of the concerns you've addressed in your objection letter directly to anyone at DEQ, correct?
Correct. Although I would say I did request an informal conference with DEQ, which was denied, which could have saved us a huge amount of time and money.
You would agree, Ms. Malone, that you have now had an opportunity to express your concerns in front of the Environmental Quality Council, true?
Yes, it's somewhat intimidating stage, but yes.
Ms. Malone, based on what you've heard today, or you've heard throughout this week, you understand that there are many commitments that Brook has made in this permit application to protect the environment in and around its proposed mine, right?
No. What I've understood is that not enough commitments have been made by Brook. A lot of people that have testified this week have pointed out that there are significant gaps and that other measures need to be in place before this permit is granted. And I believe that when our experts are able to testify, that will become even more clear.
So you would agree with me, Ms. Malone, that you do not trust the experts at DEQ to do their mandate to protect the environment, right?
I didn't say that.
I have no other questions.
I didn't say
It's
that.
fine, she answered.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton. Mr. Rock.
Good morning, Ms. Malone.
Morning.
Same question I've been asking everyone else. Do you have any other concerns or questions about this permit application that you haven't yet expressed that you want to get on the record?
Well, I'd like to see Brook Mine, whoever they are, be a better neighbor. My concerns are that if Brook Mine is the kind of neighbor they've been thus far, the future is not going to be so rosy for these landowners that live out there. And if you want me to go into detail, I will.
I think that's all right. And I know you said that a permit with conditions is not enough, but if you had to suggest conditions for the council, are there any you'd suggest?
I would suggest all the conditions that other objectors have mentioned throughout the week. And I'm not an expert in, in blasting. I'm not an expert in hydrology. But I believe that there are gaps that actually could be quite dangerous for miners and for residents and for recreationists if they aren't addressed. But ultimately, I believe there are too many unknowns.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. LaRock. Ms. Boomgarden.
No questions.
Thank you. Council members, any questions? Deb?
No questions.
Megan? Dick?
No.
And I have no further questions.
Well, goodness, I did a good job, or a bad job.
Except I want to thank you for being here with us today.
I do want also to thank the council for taking this much time out of, I know you have busy lives, and coming to
Ms. Anderson?
oversee this.
Dr. Bagley, I really don't want to ask about the reading habits. in the bathroom with Ms. Malone. So I think I have no further questions.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm dismissed.
You may step down.
Please.
Let us take a 10-minute break, and then we will continue.
How many more minutes?
One.
Okay, we are back in session. Just for everyone's information, Ms. Anderson does have additional witnesses. They will not be testifying today. The hearing will remain open, and I'll mention at the end of our testimonies today how that will proceed. But you have agreed to let Mr. Gilberts go ahead and call a witness. So please, Mr. Gilberts.
Thank you. Call Mary Beasley Fisher.
Have you raised your right hand? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Now you're gonna have to really speak up.
Mrs. Fisher, would you state your full name for the record, please?
First, I just have to say, I think I caught what Miss Boomgarden has, so I will do my best. Mary, M-A-R-Y, Brezik Fisher, B-R-E-Z-I-K dash Fisher, F-I-S-H-E-R.
Mrs. Fisher, where do you live?
I live along the Tongue River Valley, between Sheridan and Manchester.
The photograph we have up, Fisher number 1, is your property located near or on this photo?
Yes, it is. It's located towards this right-hand corner.
And is your husband here with us today?
Yes, he is.
They're in the back there trying to hide to make sure I don't call him.
Probably.
Now, everybody else in the room knows, but the council doesn't. Mr. or Mrs. Fisher, we know each other outside of attorney and client.
Yes, we do.
And how is that?
I work with you at Yonke and Toner.
Okay. Occasionally, the partners at Yankee and Toner force you to work with me.
Yes, they do.
Mary, I know you've got to see witnesses a number of times in the courtroom. I suspect you're getting a new appreciation of how stressful it is.
Most certainly.
Bear with us and we'll get through this. We'll start with some easy questions. Would you give the council a brief description of your and David's background before you came to the home?
Okay. I'll try to be brief, but my husband his career has been spent in the field of education for over 40 years. He taught at a school or schools in Iowa initially, I believe, and then he taught at Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana. From there, he taught in some inner city. He moved up to an administrative position with some inner city schools in Indiana and Ohio. And then from there, he became the director of teacher education at Urbana College in Urbana, Ohio. And from there, we then moved out to Wyoming, and I guess I can go into the rest of that story after I address my.
Now, I've asked this because I understand that you were a probation officer at one point in time.
Yes, I was a juvenile probation officer.
Is that in Indiana?
Yes, in Lake County, Lake County, Indiana.
Can you tell the council what it was that brought you and Mr. Fisher to Wyoming?
We were living in Ohio at the time, and we had been coming out to the Bonneville Salt Flats in Wendover, Utah for a number of years. And we, of course, traveled through Interstate 80 in southern Wyoming. And I had one of my brothers lived in Casper, Wyoming, and we always made an effort to stop and spend some time with him. He has worked in the oil industry during his entire career. He's now retired.
I'm pleased that you brought up your travels to Bonneville. Is it true that in fact you hold a woman's land speed record for racing in Bonneville?
Yes, I do.
So tell us then how you come to be in Wyoming.
On our trips out to the salt flats, oh, and I should mention that my land speed record was faster than my husband's. I want that on the record. As I said, we had been coming out and we would stop in Casper to visit my brother. And we traveled around a little bit on occasion, and we really loved the state of Wyoming. The oil industry was booming at the time. This was in the late 79, 1980, early part of 1980. And we had decided things in Ohio economically were experiencing a great downturn. The college where my husband was experiencing major budget cuts, and the economy was not improving. A lot of people were losing their jobs, and we just thought this might be a good time to make a break and go someplace and do something completely different, or just see what the new landscape had to offer. So we made a decision, and we packed up our things and did what we needed to do to sell our house, and packed everything up and came out here. And we initially stayed in Casper with my brother for a few months.
What was the thing that came to be your profession once you arrived in Wyoming?
Well, one day my husband, I believe, saw an ad in the paper, in the Casper paper, and he showed it to me, and we both kind of thought, well, this might be something really interesting to do, a different chapter in our lives. There was an ad for managers of a guest ranch, Paradise Guest Ranch, which is one of the oldest dude ranches in the country. And the company who owned Paradise Guest Ranch was Apache Oil out of Minnesota. So we applied. We didn't really think that we would hear anything, but we did, and we were scheduled for an interview, and we interviewed for that position, and we got the job.
Just briefly, give the council a quick synopsis of what, after Paradise Guest Ranch, what you did until the time frame in which you bought the property.
We were at Paradise Guest Ranch for approximately 3 years. And then my husband was offered a position with the Gillette School District. So we moved to Gillette. And David he had a dual position. Gillette had just opened an alternative school, the Gillette School District. And he became the director and principal of the alternative school. And at the same time, he became the director through the school district again of the vocational technical post-secondary school in Gillette.
Did David have occasion to come in contact with the mines in Gillette in that position?
Yes, he did.
How was that?
He developed a mine training program for new miners, and he also had developed a certified welding program and a number of those students ended up getting jobs with the mines. So he had a lot of contact with mine officials, setting up these programs and implementing the programs.
During this time frame, did you at some point become a paralegal?
Yes, I did. I actually moved to Denver in 1986. I had applied with the Denver Paralegal Institute I'd always been interested in law, and especially after my work in the juvenile justice system in Indiana. And I decided that that would be a pretty good field to go into, that depending on where we ended up, I probably could get a job just about anywhere. So I did that. It was a 6 months intensive program, and with the last month being an internship with a district court judge in Denver.
So let's take ourselves up in time to roughly when you and David purchased the property we're going to talk about today. Do you remember how you first came to know about this property and look at it?
Well, actually, my husband was, well, I guess I should say from Gillette then. He was offered a job at Sheridan College as the dean of the Agriculture, Health, and Technical Careers divisions. So we moved from Gillette to Buffalo because I had been offered a job with a law firm in Sheridan, not Yonke and Toner yet, but Davis and Cannon. So we lived in Buffalo, and David drove to Gillette every day to work, and I drove to Sheridan.
And then sometime after that was when David became the dean of the ag department up here.
Correct.
So then after that is, let's talk about the property that we have at issue. What caused you to have interest in or look at this particular piece of property?
David worked with Joan Tellez, who was the director of the dental hygiene program at Sheridan College. And Joan's brother, you met Anton Bosick a few minutes ago, who testified here. He is our neighbor just up the road from us. And Joan had mentioned to David one day that she knew that we had been looking for property outside of town. And she mentioned to him that there was a fellow, an older fellow, who owned property down the road from her brother on Slater Creek Lane. And she encouraged David to go out and look at it because she thought that it might be something we would be interested in. So he he did that without telling me, and he absolutely loved it. And he told me about it that evening, and so we drove out there the next day.
Did you find the location of the property?
Immensely.
And what about it was attractive to you?
We both wanted to live outside of town, even though I wasn't raised in a rural location. David was raised on a farm, and you may have heard the expression, you can take the boy out of the farm, but you can't take the farm out of the boy. And that's kind of how it was with David. We looked at when I saw the property, I thought it just had everything we had been looking for. A view of the mountains in the background, the river, wooded areas, hay fields. It was somewhat isolated, but yet it was accessible to the highway so that we could both get back and forth to work.
So happy with the location. How were the amenities? How was the house and the surroundings?
Well, David saw, I guess when you see the photo of what the house looked like, I looked at David when I first saw it and I thought he was crazy. It looked like it was going to entail a lot of work.
What did you understand about how long it had been since anyone had lived in the home?
It was our understanding in talking with the fellow who owned it, Mr. Adelman, that his wife had passed away a couple of years earlier, and they had lived in Ranchester, but they had owned the property for a number of years. I believe in the 1950s he purchased it. And but they hadn't lived there. His wife had become ill, and they hadn't lived there for about 15 years. No one had.
Let's take a quick look at that. We have picture number 2 here. Is this similar to what the house looked like when you first bought it?
Yes, it is.
And then over time, did you come to have any understanding of the history of the home? How long have you been there? Things of that nature?
Well, yes, quite obviously it was quite old. We have a rock building on the property that has initials etched on it with the date of 1913.
Take a look at that photo in a minute. Did there ever come a time that descendants of the people who built the house happened to come by?
Yes, a carload of folks drove up one afternoon and they introduced themselves as being descendants of people who used to own it and live in the house. And they were very interested in the history and what the property looked like and what had happened to the property since their descendants had left, since their heirs had left.
We have a photo up here, picture 2.2. What is this, a photo of it, you know?
Well, the people who came to our house that day, I believe I think his name was Stan Navarro, and he had this picture he had showed us, and he was identifying or attempting to identify the folks in the photo, and he said he believed it was a wedding party.
Did you understand the house that you were looking at buying, the one that you already bought at that time?
Well, we had already bought, right, we had already bought it, yes.
So let's talk a moment then, a few photos here. We won't take a lot of time, but enough just to see a little bit about the property. What is this a picture of?
This is the rock barn structure that's on the property.
And you were mentioning that it has a date etched in it. This looks like it's not presenting quite as well as we might hope, but
Yes, it says the initials are LS and the date is July 26, 1913. And it's my understanding and research in looking at our deeds and in speaking with the folks who stopped to visit us that day, there was a couple named Leon and Mary Sigoski, and I can't begin to tell you how to spell that. And I guess I would assume that those initials are from Leon Sigoski.
is this a picture of another structure on your property?
Yes, that's as you're coming up the road to our place. That's on our property. And it's our understanding that coal miners actually lived in there
See
at
that
one
there's
time.
a little chimney sticking out of the roof.
Yes.
And then this is back to the house as you bought it, right? Picture 6?
Yes, David's version of a fixer-upper.
Okay. Let's start with the fixer-upper part. This is quite a number of years into the future, I take it.
Excuse me?
This is quite a number of years after that first photo was up.
Yes, we bought the property in 1996 and we worked on it extensively and didn't move in for 6 months until January of 1997. And we continued to work on the property while we lived there.
Okay.
This would be our version of phase 1 of the property renovation.
And we can see from this photo, did you keep the original structure intact and try to maintain it as part of the new house?
Yes, that was very important, especially to my husband. He really loved the hip roof structure. You don't see that too often. And we wanted to maintain that historical architecture, so to speak.
And I've seen a great picture of you and Viv overalls working up in the attic space of this, but I knew for some reason my technology would somehow fail me if I tried to show that photo. So, did you actively help your husband at working on the house and doing this phase 1?
Yes, we spent many, many hours.
What in the world would you guys have bought in such a rundown and dilapidated place?
Well, Sheridan County property values are quite high. They have been for quite some time. David and I had traveled. We would spend many weekends driving around Sheridan County, Johnson County, the Bighorn area. And we just came to the understanding that our finances just wouldn't allow for us to find property at that expense, unless we chose some property which we would need to do work on and renovate.
Let's take a quick look at what you called phase 2 of the house. I see now that the porch has been enclosed,
Yes,
and there's a lot of rock work put there on that front porch and around over by the walk-in door. Who did all that rock?
David and I.
And what is this photograph of Mrs. Fisher?
That's a view coming down the driveway to the house. You'll see the house is in the background. You could kind of barely see it through the trees there. A lot of mature trees on the property. David mostly planted a number of pine trees, which are now mature trees. And you'll see this is a new fence we had just completed a year ago.
And this is a photo off the yard. Is that okay for you guys to see? It's portable. Thank you. We're still in Fisher Exhibit 2. A little better. On this, is any of your property shown in this photo?
Yes.
And what direction are we looking?
Well, the mountains you'll see in the background, and our property is sort of right in here. You can barely see the house, and this is part of our neighbor's property.
This is the land between where you pointed the house out and the picture or the location where this picture is taken is some of that land yours?
Yes, shows part of our hay fields.
Okay, so that's the point. This photograph shows a portion of your hay field.
Yes.
And is this a picture of the same area?
Yes, just a different version. Again, the house is right up in that area.
Good. Well, I think we're done with that, and I want to move on to some of the concerns that you have in just a moment. But can you tell the commission about some of the types of wildlife and things that you see around your home that are important to you?
Well, when I left for the proceeding this morning, our resident sandhill crane was in our hayfield. We have a couple of bald eagles who have nested just down the river from us. We see them quite frequently. We have turkeys, pheasants. I've been out mowing the front yard, and a fox has run right by me in the hayfield. We actually have coyotes. Occasionally we'll hear the coyote pups howling across the river. Just recently, maybe a year or so ago, we were told that there was a small black bear sighted on our neighbor's property. And of course, we have deer everywhere, and also I had mentioned to you, Jay, seeing the great blue heron quite frequently along the river.
Let's talk a little bit about the mine, some of your concerns. How was it that you first came to learn that there was a proposal or someone investigating the potential of the mine in the area?
The first that we heard of it was, I believe, July of 2013. My husband called me. I was at work, I believe, that day. And he and our neighbor across the river, John Booyak, were out in our hayfield. Mr. Booyak does the haying for us. And they were working on a baler, I believe, that had broken down. And at one point, my husband happened to look up, and within about 100 feet or so, he saw two people on the property, and they appeared to be crouching down and looked like they were digging for something. And so he said to Mr. Booyak, well, that's odd. Who are those people? You know, and so the two of them started to walk towards the two individuals in the hayfield. And I might add that the two individuals certainly could have seen my husband and Mr. Booyak out in the hayfield, and they made no effort to come forward and identify themselves. So my husband and Mr. Booyak walked up to them, and David asked, who are you and what are you doing? And they indicated that they were there to take some type of samples. And David said, well, who authorized you to be here? And they indicated that it was Ramaco. Well, David had never heard of Ramaco, and he asked John, what is that? And at that point, John had mentioned, or I believe it was after the two individuals left by crawling through the fence, mentioned that Ramaco is a company that is apparently going to be proposing a new coal mine in the area.
Did you, after this interaction, did you complain at all about these folks having come on your property without permission?
Yes. My husband, as I said, he called me to report this and asked me if I knew anything about a company called Ramaco, and I said I did not. I had never heard of that. A couple of days later, I prepared a letter, and we sent a letter to BKS Environmental Associates, I think it was.
We've got that as Fisher Exhibit number 6. Is this a copy of the letter that you sent to BKS addressing the fact that folks have come on your property without permission?
Yes, it is.
Why was it sent to BKS?
Well, because my husband had noticed a white truck parked on our neighbor's property the day of the trespass incident. And then the very next day, he was taking our daughter and grandchildren who had been visiting us, he was taking them back to the Billings Airport. And as he drove down the frontage road, he saw 3 white trucks with BKS on the, identified on the truck.
Did you ever receive any response from BKS to your complaint?
No, we did not.
Did you receive any response from anyone at Ramaco to your complaint?
No, we did not.
Now, Mrs. Fisher, I don't want to spend too much time doing this, but there's been some questions that objectors didn't bother to investigate the details of the mine plan and understand what was being proposed. I want to visit with you for a little bit about what you did. Once you learned there was a proposed mine in the area, as things moved along, what was some of the first things you did to inform yourself about this potential mine?
Well, I started to look on the internet for information about Ramaco. As I said, I had not heard of them. And I was able to pull up a prospectus of the company. And then I also began researching information on potential impacts of a new coal mine being proposed.
How did you do research about the potential impacts of coal mine?
Mostly on the internet.
I'm obligated to ask you, was any of that on your work computer? You don't have to answer.
I spent many lunch hours and nights and weekends. We have a home computer.
Very good. Was there ever a time that you attended any landowner meetings facilitated by the Powder River Basin Resource Council?
Yes.
Why did you go to those?
Well, because there didn't appear to be any other information from anybody else about what was happening, anything about the coal mine, other than I started to see articles in the newspaper from Ramaco individuals, I believe mainly Mr. Atkins, and there were proposals for a pretty big mine employing about 600 people. And so, you know, I was wondering, why haven't we heard anything about this from anybody?
Were you looking for more information?
Absolutely.
We heard a little bit yesterday about an early meeting at which Jeff Barron from Western Water Consultants attended one of these meetings. Do you recall whether you were present at that meeting?
Yes, my husband and I were present. It was my understanding, I seem to recall seeing something, maybe a brochure or something, advertising that there was going to be a meeting for landowners who were interested in learning more about the Brook mine.
How did that particular meeting start?
Well, it was held at the library in Sheridan. They have a room there, which when we walked in, it was completely full. And everyone sat down and the rest of the folks were standing in the back. And I believe it was Jill Morrison asked everybody, well, people signed in, some people, they had a sign-in sheet. And then everyone kind of sat down and the rest of the people were standing in the back when there were no more seats available. And then Jill identified herself and asked the rest of the folks there to identify themselves and indicate if they were a landowner. And so we went around and everyone introduced themselves, and most of the folks who were landowners indicated that they were landowners.
Okay. Did anyone during that initial round identify themselves as being present on behalf of Brook?
No, they did not, but I happened to notice Shalene Smith was in the audience, and I knew that she was a city councilwoman, and I knew that she did not live out in that area as far as I knew, and I was wondering what the city council was doing there. So I raised my hand and asked if anybody was attending the meeting who was there on behalf of Ramaco. And I believe I also asked if anyone was there from the DEQ.
Okay. And what happened then?
Then Shalene Smith identified herself as being there on behalf of Ramaco. And I believe that Mr. Barron was sitting next to her and he identified himself as being there on behalf of Ramaco.
Yesterday, Council heard from Mr. Barron that at this meeting, he offered that anyone who wanted to come by his office would to ask questions. Do you recall that being said at this meeting?
I don't recall.
So we've talked a little bit about you doing reading and research to understand some of these things. Let's go forward to about April of 2016. What other things were you doing in that time frame to try to understand this mine plan and what was going to happen?
Well, I was, I had reviewed, I believe we were having meetings. The Resource Council had a series of meetings for landowners who were interested in getting an update on what was transpiring with the mine plan. I began reviewing documents that were available, like the mine plan, portions of it. At some of these meetings, Jill or Shannon would bring plat maps showing the phases of the mine operation, and we were able to view those.
Was there a time ever that you were supportive of a request to the DEQ for a meeting with them?
Yes.
Was that around April of 2016?
Yes, in April of 2016, it appeared that by that time, there was more of an indication that things were progressing with the mine plan. And there were many changes that had been made up to that point, I believe. But yet, there were a lot of uncertainties and a lot of issues that didn't seem to be addressed by anyone. And the landowners as a group decided, we had varying backgrounds. We had coal miners, we had an engineer, we had people like us in different fields. Everyone had issues, and discussing them openly in a setting like a meeting, an informal meeting, was very productive and helpful to all of us. And we felt that it would be, we were at a point where we really would like to have sat down with somebody like DEQ and or Ramaco and discuss some of these concerns collectively as a group.
And Mary, I would like to go ahead and flesh out a little bit more what you did, but we want to move along a little bit faster.
Okay.
So if you know, was a request made to DEQ for a meeting with them and potentially Ramaco to discuss these issues?
Yes, I believe there were several requests made.
And what was your understanding of the response?
The request for an informal meeting or just a meeting with the landowners was not agreed to by the DEQ.
Okay. And we know from Fisher Exhibit 17, I believe, which we were able to obtain in discovery internal emails inside the DEQ that show us that that request was in fact received by DEQ, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, in addition to trying to inform yourself by involving yourself with DEQ, we've heard all about the mine plan. Did you ever have occasion to look at the 80-page mine plan?
Yes, we both did, my husband and I.
Did you ever have a chance to look at the adjudication file?
Yes.
Okay, and did you?
Yes.
I didn't ask you that question. Did you look at this?
Yes.
Did you read all 80 pages?
I reviewed every page, yes.
We got all of those binders up behind you. Did there ever come a time that you had access to those?
Yes, we had access to, I don't believe there were all, I don't recall if there were all 13, but there were a number of volumes. In one of our meetings, I don't remember the date, but Jill and Shannon indicated that if any landowner was interested in reviewing the mine plan in detail, that they would have, that they had checked the mine plan out with the DEQ and had these volumes available at their offices, at their office in Sheridan. So my husband and I went there one morning, arranged a time to be there, and indicated that we were interested in reviewing the volumes of materials.
Did you and your husband, in fact, look at materials from those big binders of materials?
Yes.
And how long did you spend wading through the gobbledygook?
Over an hour, and it could have been 2, because there were also a number of plat maps available.
So to be clear, Mrs. Fisher, did you do all of these things to try to understand and inform yourself about the mine and the plans before you filed an objection?
Absolutely.
Why did you decide to file an objection?
Well, I guess it was our understanding all along that there would be an opportunity for some sort of a meeting with DEQ in particular, and perhaps even with Ramaco, so that landowners who potentially could be impacted would have an opportunity to ask questions and hopefully resolve some issues, which I think we very well could have done in that forum.
Are you telling us that you thought filing the objection would get you?
Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, even before we received the public notice to file a written objection, all along for all these months, I mean, Sheridan and Sheridan County, as in other communities, have numerous regular public meetings addressing issues involving fluoride in the water, a new permit for a gravel pit, issues concerning revisions in pathways for the local city park, things of that nature. So I guess we just assumed there would certainly be a series of meetings set up to address concerns of landowners within a half-mile boundary of a new coal mine.
When you prepared and filed your objection, did you have any earthly idea that this was what you were going to get?
I certainly did not.
Now, just to be clear, did you ask me or any other attorney at Yankee and Toner to help you in any way with your objection letter?
I did not.
When did that change?
That changed when our letter was submitted along with other objectors, and David and I received a letter from Todd Parfit from DEQ. I believe it was dated January 30th, 2017, in which Mr. Parfit indicated that the DEQ was denying our request for an informal public meeting or hearing.
Mrs. Fisher, let's talk a little bit about some of the specific complaints that you have. One that was raised was a complaint that the way that the application of materials had been drafted was that protections would only be afforded to adjudicated wells, right?
Correct.
And you know, now we've heard in these proceedings, there's been an agreement to change that to be including permitted wells, not just adjudicated, right?
Yes.
Okay. How does that make you feel that that change has been done?
Well, I very much appreciated that, as did my husband, and as I'm sure other landowners feel. But I really wondered why the issue didn't come up or could not be addressed until we submitted a request in our discovery in this contested case proceeding.
Let's talk about some of the continuing issues or concerns about water. What is your understanding of the source for the water in your well at your house? What does it come from?
My understanding is that it comes from through a coal seam.
And do you understand whether or not Brook has predicted that you will suffer a drawdown, you're likely to suffer a drawdown as a result of the mining activities?
Yes, I was here for Mr. Barron's testimony the other day.
Yet during Mr. Barron's testimony, you heard him say that your well has a high column of water. Did you hear that?
Yes.
I'm certain Mr. Barron got that from the information on the original drill log the day the well was drilled 34 years ago. You believe there's a large column of water standing in your well today?
I do not.
Has Mr. Barron ever been to your place to inspect and determine what the actual level of water is in your well now 34 years later? 34 years after the first.
Well, I guess you didn't indicate how that date was established.
Okay.
Sorry.
We can do it. The permit for your water well is contained within the mine planning records, correct?
Correct.
Do you remember off of the top of the head off the top of your head when that well was permitted, meaning Adam and number?
Approximately 1978.
What forms the basis of your concern that your well is at risk for some sort of material damage as a result of dewatering?
Well, Mr. Barron testified the other day that there would be a drawdown on our well. Well, we have two wells, but I believe he just addressed the one. by the house, and he indicated that we would have a 5-foot drawdown.
Anything else inform your concern in this regard?
Well, after hearing that testimony from Mr. Barron, when we left here that day, we went back to the office. My husband was with me, and we looked at our permit documents regarding that well. And I believe that evening, Mr. Wireman had stopped in the office to visit with, I believe you may have asked him to come by to visit with you, and he showed up. And being that Mr. Wireman is a hydrologist, I showed him our permit documents.
Why does that inform your concern about the well?
Because he looked at them and he indicated to us that he had grave concerns about the drawdown on our well.
There has been some discussion during the course of these proceedings about the potential of a condition on the permit that doesn't just say that that the mining company will be obligated to replace the quantity and quality generally, but making that a bit more specific. If this application is going to proceed, is that the kind of condition you would like this council to consider?
Yes.
Let's talk about the Tongue River very briefly. Do you and your husband rely to any degree on the quality and quantity of water in the Tongue River?
Yes, we do.
What do you use it for?
We irrigate. We have hayfields.
You have a surface water right from the state engineers to do that.
Yes.
One of the things that you brought up in your complaint letter was about the way the quality and quantity of the Tongue River would be monitored. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And you understand from these proceedings that now there's an agreement to consider that and alter the way the Tongue River will be monitored?
Yes, I understand DEQ has agreed to install additional monitors upstream and downstream as a result of our request in discovery.
Good. How do you feel about that?
I'm very appreciative of that.
Let's talk about the alluvial subsurface water by you, and I know folks are trying to get you placed in comparison to everything that we've seen in the case, so I'm going to pull up DEQ number 16, which is a map we've seen a bunch. Mrs. Fisher, and so this gives us the Brook Mine permit acreage, and it shows us an area called potential ABF acreage. You tell the council whether or not your property is located within the area labeled potential ABF acreage.
It is.
Okay, and if we zoom in even tighter, we can see both of these things. We can see right here it says section 24.
Yes.
And over here you can see section 19.
Yes.
Are those two sections familiar to you?
Yes, those are the sections which within which our property is contained.
Okay. And so it overlaps. Your property is near the river, correct?
Yes,
And somewhere in the vicinity of section 19 and section 24.
Correct.
Together.
Yes.
So we've talked a bit about this being labeled a potential AVF acreage and whether or not it should be classified that way. I want to be clear with you. Did anyone from DEQ ever contact you and ask you if they could come on your property to do studies to determine if your land should be properly fully classified as AVF?
No,
Do you have any objection to DEQ?
absolutely not.
Are you aware of any of your neighbors being contacted by DEQ about an AVF study?
No, I'm not aware of any.
One thing hasn't been clear. I think I've heard at times that there is maybe an agreement to put monitoring wells in this potential ABF acreage. And at other times it sounded like maybe not. If a permit is going to be issued in this case, would a condition you would like this council to consider be the placement of monitoring wells in this alluvial valley floor to monitor the water in the alluvium for changes?
Yes, I think that would be an important thing to do.
All right. We're going to get through them. We're flipping right along now. I'm going to keep up the pace. Let's talk about blasting for a minute, and I think we can do this one pretty quickly. Your concerns are the same as many of those this council has heard, correct?
Yes.
And there has been a discussion of if it was a requirement that a homeowner could request and would be provided with seismic monitoring between the mine and their home. If that was a condition of permit, that folks would like that. Or you're also asking council to consider the requirement that if a homeowner asks for it, seismic monitoring to be placed on the property between them and us.
Yes, we are.
One of the things that you had brought up in your objection letter was a concern about traffic that might be associated with the mining activities and things of that nature. Over time, have you ever developed an understanding about if the amount of coal that is mined is something similar to what Brook has projected, how many trucks, semi trucks that might mean hauling coal out every day? What's your understanding about how many semis per day that would be? Okay, and is that a matter of some concern to you? Now, I'm going to end here soon, Mrs. Fisher, but
So we need a technical.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I would encourage parties now who are here today, please.
Thank you. Is it working now? We'll wait till they're all changed or whatever needs changed. Is that mic working? We don't see the light on. Because you shouldn't see the light. All right, please continue.
pattern of technology and me not communicating well is continuing. Mrs. Fisher, I realized that I did not ask you something earlier. You talked about attending a number of meetings hosted by the Powder River Basin Resource Council. Are you and your husband members of that organization?
No, we are not.
So the way we thought we would come to this point is that Dr. Marino and Mr. Wireman, our experts, would have testified already. So I want to visit with you about that for a moment. A lot of folks have talked about the concerns of subsidence, and we've talked all around those issues. I don't think we need to visit with them anymore, other than for me to ask you, do you share the same concerns that others do about the risk of subsidence?
Yes, we do.
Are there any special concerns that you have about the subsidence as it may relate to the water quantity involved?
Yes.
And what is that?
Well, we have evidence of ongoing subsidence. I guess I would have to reserve my comments about that in terms of this overall subsidence issues until hearing testimony from Dr. Marino.
Well, we won't be in a position to reserve further testimony, but let's go about it this way. We've talked We've talked a little bit as we went through today about if a permit is granted, that you would like to see this council consider some conditions on that in relation to a variety of issues, correct?
Correct.
By saying that, does that mean that you do not have any remaining reservations about the adequacy of the mine plan or scientific testing or studying that has been done up to this point?
That I don't have?
Yeah, that you don't have any more. That's all it is about these conditions we visited about.
No, I can't say that that's true.
Okay. Have you, as you have been informed and about the mine plan, have you kept yourself informed and abreast of the opinions of Dr. Marino and the subsidence expert and Mr. Wireman, the hydrologist?
Yes, I have.
Do those opinions cause you any concern?
Yes, I read their reports and they do cause me concern, just as Mr. Gerlach's testimony caused concern.
And do you believe that once the council gets to hear from Dr. Marino and Mr. Wireman, that there will then be evidence that perhaps no permit should be issued at all at this time?
At this time, yes.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Mr. Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Mrs. Fisher. How are you?
I've been better.
I'm sure you have. Let me be the first after Mr. Gilbert's to tell you congratulations on your land speed record. I knew that there was a reason you and I sort of got along. You heard Ms. Malone testify right before you, right?
Yes.
And did you hear her expressing some concerns about how this operation that Brook is proposing could affect the city of Sheridan?
Yes.
Just to be clear, Ms. Malone was not speaking on your behalf, was she, Mrs. Fisher?
No, she was not.
And I think you just told us that you are not currently a member of the Powder River Basin Resource Council, correct?
Correct.
But you have relied on the Powder River Basin Resource Council as a part of this case, right?
Yes.
You heard in the opening statement that my client, or maybe me personally, I don't know, would attempt to call the Powder River Basin Resource Council activists. Did you hear that in Ms. Anderson's opening?
I believe, yeah, I can't specifically recall that, but yes. I was here.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. Fisher. That was actually a term that you brought up in your deposition, right?
Correct.
And I think you said that you saw in a newspaper article that Randall Atkins, the CEO at Ramaco, had made a comment calling landowners activists, right?
That was my recollection, yes.
Right, and you didn't like the idea of being called an activist, correct?
I didn't like the idea of being generalized. Mr. Atkins doesn't know me or my husband.
And in fact, I think in your deposition, as one of the reasons why you are not a member of the Powder River Basin Resource Council, you told me you didn't want to be lumped in with a bucket of activists, right?
Correct.
Now, I know that you felt uncomfortable about the formalities of this proceeding, right?
Yes.
By the way, you're doing a marvelous job, and I understand that it's not a fun seat to be in. Notwithstanding the formalities, you would agree with me that you've now had an opportunity to have the public meeting that you were hoping to get with your objection letter, right?
Well, it's not exactly the forum that I was expecting, no.
Okay. Would you agree with me that the denial of your request for an informal conference was a decision made by the director of the DEQ?
Could you restate that, please?
I certainly can. What I'm getting at is you don't believe that the decision to deny the informal conference was a decision made by my client, Brook Mining Company, do you?
I don't have any evidence to that effect, no.
The letter that you received denying the informal conference was a letter you received directly from DEQ, right?
Correct.
Okay. You told me at your deposition that you're not an expert, right?
No, I'm not in mine plans.
Okay. And to be fair, that's true. I've seen you in action now, and I would have to say you are most definitely an expert at being a paralegal. But you're not an expert at mine plans, right?
Right.
Now that you've heard in this meeting, in this evidentiary hearing from the representatives of the Department of Environmental Quality, would you agree with me that they are experts?
Yes, I would say that they are experts. Mm-hmm.
And I mean,
very well qualified,
excuse
some
me.
of them, yes.
I mean, you would agree, for example, that Dr. Kuchenauer, with his PhD and his experience, is an expert in groundwater modeling, right?
Yes.
Okay. And I understand that there are yet some experts to testify, but is it your position today that the testimony you've heard from the experts at DEQ is not enough to satisfy the objections that you've raised?
Yes.
When you moved to the area out around, when you moved into the area where you live now, you knew that there had been historic coal mining out in that part of the county, right?
Yes.
And you also knew at that time that because there's still coal out there, there could be coal mining in the future, right?
I suppose, but in talking with other adjacent neighbors and landowners in the area, they had indicated, well, I don't believe we even talked about it at that point when we were purchasing the property. The thought never occurred to us that a new coal mine would be developed. There hadn't been a coal mine in that area in over 50 years. And of course, the fact that we lived along the Tongue River and in an alluvial valley floor, I guess, again, we never thought that there would ever be a new coal mine opening in that proximity.
Even though you have these questions and concerns that ultimately you raised in your objection letter, you never asked Mr. Barron to explain any of the company Brook Mines' position on this, did you?
No, as I indicated, we discussed this with other neighbors, other landowners, of which there are many. And our thoughts were that it would be beneficial for us collectively as a group to attempt to visit with DEQ and/or Ramaco. After our experience with the trespassing incident, I guess we didn't have a high level of comfort with this new company that had never done business in Wyoming, that had never made an effort to communicate with any of the landowners. And I understand in reviewing the documents that I've reviewed in this mine plan, out of the 13 volumes and thousands of pages of material here, I don't believe that there is one page devoted to landowner concerns. And there are well over 100 landowners, maybe closer to 200 landowners within that half a mile boundary. Mr. Christensen had indicated in his testimony, I believe, that they had never had such a large number of landowners involved.
So I understand that you have some other things it sounds like you want to say to the council, but in the interest of my questions and moving them along, we'll try to keep it a little more focused. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, so my question was, you did not ask Mr. Barron to address any of the questions you and your husband had, right?
No.
Okay. Nor did you ask anyone else from Brook Mining or Ramaco to address any of your questions, right?
No, I didn't know anybody from Ramaco.
Well, you testified earlier that you knew Shalene Smith was there on behalf of Ramaco, right?
Oh, right, shoot, yes, that's correct.
Okay. But you never asked Ms. Smith to answer any of your questions, right?
No, I didn't know what her capacity was with Ramaco.
On that same line, you never went personally to ask anyone at the Department of Environmental Quality to address any of your concerns or Mr. Fisher's concerns, right?
As I indicated, we were approaching this from the perspective of there were a large group of us who were questioning a number of things, had concerns. Many of us were not experts in anything to do with a mine plan. And we were anticipating all along, maybe naively, that given the fact that all those other public hearings were going on a regular basis in this community, that at some point the company would have come forward or DEQ would have come forward and agreed to meet with us.
So again, I appreciate you. Sounds like you have more to say. I know that you've told the council some of those things already. But I guess what I'd like to ask is that's another example of where you and Mr. Fisher were relying on Powder River Basin Resource Council to help in this process, right?
Right.
All right. I think just to wrap up, Mrs. Fisher, you talked about the unfortunate first interaction that your husband and Mr. Booyak had with someone on behalf of, well, I guess we assume on behalf of Brook Mine, right? The trespass issue?
That we assume?
Well, I just don't know if it was clear. How do you know that whoever was out on the property that day was associated with the Brook Mine?
Well, as I indicated, the two individuals who were trespassing told my husband they were there on behalf of Ramaco.
Okay. You now know that that those two individuals were on your property mistakenly, right?
Apparently.
Right, I mean, I guess what I mean is you now know that there was no malicious intent with them going to the property, right?
Well, I know that through the discovery in this contested case proceeding, yes.
Right, and you now understand that they thought they were actually on a different parcel, right?
I don't know that I understand that. No one has directly communicated that to me or my husband.
Well, I guess just to wrap up, you understand now that that company, once they spoke to your husband, they did not take any samples from your property, right?
That's what you indicated in your discovery responses. So I don't know.
And you would agree that there's no evidence in the mine plan or any of the appendices that shows data being collected from your property, right?
I'm not aware of seeing anything. No.
Okay. Well, I don't have any other questions for you. Thank you, Mrs. Fisher.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton. Mr. Narok.
Good afternoon. Again, I'm sorry, the same question I've been asking everyone else. Now that we're on the record, do you have any concerns or any questions about this permit application that you haven't gotten out yet?
Well, yes.
Please, go ahead and tell me about it.
Well, as I indicated earlier, I have read the expert reports of Dr. Marino and Mr. Wireman, who appear to be, by all accounts, very highly qualified professionals. And until such time as I hear additional testimony from them, I guess I would have to reserve the right to address this issue further.
Okay. Is there anything else about the permit application you want to talk about?
Wow, that's pretty broad.
I know it is very broad. I'm sorry about that.
I appreciate the time and effort spent by the DEQ folks. I just wish that there would have been a mechanism for us to have some meetings to express our concerns. I really believe we could have resolved a lot of these issues without having to hire an attorney, I might add.
And I know you just testified that you believe there will be evidence that a permit shouldn't be granted at all. But were a permit to be granted, do you have any other conditions you'd like to suggest to on the permit?
Well, again, until hearing from Dr. Marino and Mr. Wireman, I can't say that for sure. Issues that we brought up about the adjudicated versus registered or permitted wells, the issue concerning the additional monitoring the Tongue River upstream and downstream. I guess I sort of wonder why it took us, the lay people, to bring those issues to the attention of the DEQ. So my level of comfort is not extremely high.
Appreciate that. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Narok. Ms. Baumgarten?
No questions.
Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, Dr. Bagley. Good afternoon, Mrs. Fisher. A moment ago, you were asked about the expertise of DEQ, and you've been in the room most of the week, right?
Yes.
Were you here when Mr. Christensen testified?
Yes.
Were you here when he testified on his expertise related to subsidence?
Yes.
Do you remember him saying that he doesn't actually have expertise related to subsidence?
Yes.
I'm going to have to object to that. I think it's a mischaracterization of what Mr. Christensen said.
Dr. Bagley, I think the transcript will eventually show that he said exactly what I just represented he said.
Yeah, you can go ahead and ask that.
Okay. Maybe I'll phrase it a different way, just for the sake of the record. Mrs. Fisher, do you have any concerns about Mr. Christensen's expertise related to subsidence?
Yes.
I have another question for you. Are you and your neighbors concerned at all about property values and what could happen to your property value if the mine comes in next door to you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry.
Go ahead. Could you elaborate?
I was just going to say that we, quite obviously from the photo of the house when we purchased it, it's quite evident that we've spent a lot of time, energy, and money um, improving our property to the condition that it's in right now. This is our retirement, and I am very concerned that it's going to have a major impact in attempting to sell our property at such time if we choose to do so.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Council members have any questions? Nick?
No.
Megan? Okay. I just have one question, Mrs. Fisher. As we look at all these maps, and you've probably heard me ask this question before, I just try to get a feel for where we're located. Are you north or south of the Tongue River?
We're north of the Tongue River.
Okay, thank you. That was the only question I had. I wanted to also thank you for.
Well, that was easy.
Yeah, for your coming, speaking.
Thank you. And I will add what has been already indicated by other landowners who have testified, that David and I very, very much appreciate having this opportunity finally, and also having the hearing up here in Sheridan as opposed to Cheyenne, which was originally indicated. So we very much appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Gilbert, anything?
I've been informed that I will be flayed alive if I ask any more questions about my client. So no further questions.
Not by us.
No, my client was very clear about that.
Okay, good. Thank you, Mrs. Fisher.
Thank you.
So it is 12:20, Friday afternoon, May 26th. We will shortly recess this hearing. There are additional witnesses that will be presented and their testimony, and we are working on a time for that. We are looking at the June 8th timeframe, but Mr. Ruby will be in contact with all of the parties to confirm these dates and times early next week. So I want to thank everybody who's been here, and council members who have remained. Thank you very much as well. Others that wanted to be here but have other duties as well. And all the folks who have been in the audience, appreciate everyone's testimony. And I would like to wish everyone an excellent Memorial Day weekend. I hope the weather stays nice for us. And we are now recessed.